In July 1990, four Czech guys decided to go on an adventure to find the Mongolian death worm, a creature that might have inspired the monster you've seen in the movie Doom. They say it lives somewhere deep in the Gobi Desert, so they flew to Mongolia, hopped into an ATV, and hired some local guides to help them. All that to meet a creature that is up to 6 feet long, can spit acid that could melt anything, and is capable of shooting electricity at those it doesn't like. Legend says that these friendly guys spend most of their days hiding underneath the sandy dunes, but they'd like to come out during the wetter months of June and July. So the timing for a spotting was simply perfect. But the crew needed to figure out how to lure the creature. Sadly for them, no one knew what the giant worm liked to eat. So they built a thumper, which is a machine that made rhythmic pounding noises. They were hoping it would call the worm out of the ground. For 2 months, they searched the vast desert, crossing dunes and rocky plains, looking for any sign of the creature. But alas, it didn't really work out. Ivan McCurley, who was the leader of the 1990 expedition, came back to Gobi Desert again. He once tried to attract the megaworm with blasts, and the second time he used a small airplane to scout the dunes. Over the years, groups from America, Britain, and New Zealand organized big expeditions to the Gobi Desert to try and find the creature. Many others came from all around the world on their own and found nothing. The people in the West first found out about the megaworm of the Gobi Desert thanks to an American paleontologist, Roy Chapman Andrews. This brave man was probably the inspiration for Indiana Jones. In 1926, he wrote about the creature in his book. At a meeting with Mongolian leaders, Andrews heard detailed descriptions of the creature, even though none of them had ever seen it themselves. One of them described it as looking like a sausage, about 2 feet long, with no head or legs. According to him, the worm was so venomous that just touching it could instantly take your life, and it lived in the loneliest parts of the Gobi Desert. Andrews didn't think the creature was real, but he shared these stories again in another book. In May 2005, 4 friends from Great Britain who search for monsters professionally decided to try their luck. They made drawings of the worm and hired local people to hand out flyers all over the Gobi Desert. These flyers offered a reward to anyone who could give information about the worm or even bring them a specimen. They thought loud sounds that other explorers tried would scare the beast away. Some told them it likes damp conditions, so they came up with a plan to block streams of water to create wet areas that would lure the worm out. Their plan didn't work because it was too hard to build dams in the desert. They ended up using small traps, but didn't find any actual proof that the worm existed. But they did meet locals who shared interesting stories about strange creatures they had seen over 70 years. Over the years, stories of the monster spread around the world. In some of them, it's only 1 foot long. In others, it's as large as a human. It's white-gray or scaly and brown, or maybe fleshy and bright red. Someone said it resembled a snake, or maybe a caterpillar, or maybe it has wings and can fly. And some believe it could be a supernatural evil being without a body. Maybe the stories are so different, and the search operations are so fruitless, because the creature doesn't even exist. Or it could be one of many cryptids. Those creatures like Bigfoot, Yeti, the Loch Ness monster, their existence has yet to be proven. In 1983, one scientist who was visiting the region heard that an old man had managed to catch the mysterious worm. He also learned there was a nest nearby. The scientist bravely approached the hole in the sand and put his hand inside. A giant creature dragged him in, and he was never seen again. Just kidding. He actually found a Tartar sand boa inside. It's a chunky, burrowing, non-venomous snake that has small eyes and gray-brown scales. He showed it to the locals to verify if it was the monster, and supposedly all of them said yes. Most Mongolians who know about the worm still believe it's real. Now, even though people call our supposed monster a worm, it's just what it sounds like in the English translation. Many Mongol cultures have used this word for centuries to refer to any animals they thought to be really dangerous, especially snakes, even non-venomous ones. So, it doesn't have to be a literal worm after all. Worms are soft and squishy, but a creature living in the harsh Gobi Desert would need to be tougher, more like a snake or a type of lizard without legs. Neither of these creatures can shoot electricity or spit acid like they say the death worm does. But some snakes, like cobras, can spit venom that's dangerous for people. If it were real, the creature would have a backbone, and explorers searching for it would likely find some bones or evidence left behind. And there are actually fossil remains all over the Gobi Desert. Scientists found representatives of over 80 dino groups here over the last almost 100 years. It all started with the world's first dinosaur egg nests. This discovery changed all the scientists knew about dinos. It was the first proof they laid eggs. In the following 2 years, the same expedition team unearthed over 100 dinosaurs and took them to the American Museum of Natural History, where you can still see them today. Some of them were swimming around in the Cretaceous Sea that used to be here about 71 million years ago. They resembled modern birds. The mystery of the megaworm is still unsolved, but there used to be another mystery scientists finally managed to explain. Back in the 13th century, a famous traveler, Marco Polo, not the guy from the swimming pool game, crossed the Gobi Desert. He thought he could hear mysterious noises, like the sounds of musical instruments such as drums. He wrote about it in his book and believed he might be hearing the voices of restless spirits. Scientists call these noises singing sands or booming sands. Unlike the squeaky sound you might hear when walking on a sandy beach, these desert sounds are much louder, like a musical instrument playing deep, haunting notes. Over the years, people came up with all kinds of ideas about what caused the sounds, like underground water or winds making the sand vibrate. Not all dunes can do this, and scientists wanted to figure out why. Sometimes the winds might cause a small avalanche on the side of a dune, and then you can hear the magical sound start. But this is rare. So, to study it, scientists had to help the dunes sing. They climbed to the top of a dune and slid down on their backs, using their hands and feet to push sand down. As the sand tumbled, the sound started softly and got louder. They could even feel the vibrations with their hands. So they found out that for a dune to sing, a few special things need to happen. The grains of sand must be the right shape. The dune has to be big, and the sand must be very dry, so no singing after it rains. Inside the dune, there's a hard layer of packed sand that acts like a giant speaker. This layer bounces the sound waves back and forth, makes the noise louder and louder, and creates a haunting melody that can fill the desert air. In other words, the dunes can play tunes. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't help myself with that one. Scientists have finally solved the Loch Ness Monster mystery. Here's the spoiler, you ready? It's not a real monster. It's probably a dinosaur that survived through the ages, or just a bunch of debris floating on the water. Thanks to many findings on the Loch Ness creature, we have proof of another story to tell you. It was 1933 when a man named George Spicer and his wife were driving along the shores of Loch Ness. That's when they saw something massive with a long neck moving across the road. It looked like a creature straight out of the prehistoric era, a dinosaur-like beast unlike anything they'd ever seen. That was the moment that Loch Ness monster theories started spreading around like wildfire. One of the most famous Loch Ness monster sightings came just a year later, in 1934, when a man took a photograph that became the most well-known image of Nessie. That's the nickname she was given. She? Anyways, the photo, known as the surgeon's photograph, showed a long-necked creature rising out of the water, and for years it convinced people that the monster was real. But years later, the truth came out. One of the men who helped take the photo confessed it was all a hoax. The photo had been staged after all. When the photo was published, it had been significantly cropped. This made the animal in the picture look much bigger than in real life, fueling the theories that the Loch Ness Monster did in fact exist. In the 1960s, one of the first big scientific attempts to investigate the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster happened. A research team took sonar equipment to the lake and spent hours scanning the waters in search of evidence of large creatures. What they found was puzzling. They recorded several objects moving deep in the loch, or lake, with no clear explanation as to what it was. Though the team didn't manage to capture anything definitive, this sighting helped fuel the belief that there was indeed something massive living in Loch Ness. After that, research about the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster kept popping up. In 1972, with the help of underwater photography, some researchers managed to capture strange images, which got people's hopes up for a minute. But the truth is, this early research about the Loch Ness Monster was far from conclusive. Now, of course, not everyone bought into the mystical, magical theories about the Loch Ness Monster. Theory 1, from a professor of zoology at Oxford University, has made it clear that the monster is a biological impossibility. Hey, my pediatrician said that about me, too. Meanwhile, he says that no skeletal remains have ever been found in the region. Plus, no fishermen have ever caught anything resembling the creature in their fishing nets. For him, this works as proof that it simply can't be real. When it comes to the famous photos of the Loch Ness Monster as evidence, well, that's pretty simple. The professor offers a more down-to-earth explanation. He argues that these images are either showing floating debris or birds, like cormorants, which have long necks and often appear to be low in the water. When people refute his suggestion, he takes us back to human psychology and explains that people often make mistakes and misjudge the size of things, especially when they just caught a glimpse of it, and even more so when they are hoping to see something specific. Now, many of those alleged photos depict an animal with a long neck and a small head, which has led some to believe that what they're seeing is a plesiosaur, a giant marine reptile that lived 215 million years ago and disappeared with the dinosaurs. The idea of a plesiosaur surviving all these years is a theory that's been around since the first sightings of the creature. But this researcher isn't buying it. He explains that no plesiosaur fossils have been found in the region dating to anything later than 66 million years ago. The idea of a prehistoric creature still lurking in the waters of Loch Ness just doesn't hold up scientifically. Then there's theory number 2, from a British naturalist who has spent over 50 years investigating the Loch Ness Monster phenomenon. His conclusion is a little less dramatic. He believes that most people who report sightings of long-necked creatures are misidentifying other animals. He suggests people think they are seeing a sea serpent. Reports of sightings from the Loch Ness Monster have been around since the 6th century CE, long before they were distilling Scotch whiskey or other explanations. Early reports of these sea serpents describe large creatures with long snake-like bodies and multiple humps. Some say the creatures were as big as boats, and many swore they saw something swimming in the waters. Many of these early sea serpent sightings may have been misunderstandings or exaggerations of normal animals in the loch, like large fish or even swimming birds. They could have been large eels, which are known to live in Loch Ness. These eels, especially when they're moving, might have given the impression of a long, undulating creature in the water. People who saw these eels from a distance, particularly in low light or misty conditions, might have mistaken them for something much more mysterious. Theory number 3 says something else. Nessie is just a series of standing waves. These happen when two boat wakes move in opposite directions, creating a big hump in the water that could look like a creature from a distance. Loch Ness enthusiasts even showed how it works, with footage from Fort Augustus, where a river meets Loch Ness. These enthusiasts had big plans to use drones with infrared cameras and special underwater microphones to search the loch. Now, Loch Ness is massive, stretching around 23 miles long and more than 700 feet deep. So, they thought they needed drones and infrared cameras to put an end to this discussion. But despite everything, they haven't found Nessie. But it's not only the Loch Ness Monster that lacks scientific explanation. There have also been scores of sightings of Yetis and Sasquatches that no one can really explain. Folks have made movies, dreaming of finding the truth about these creatures. But, according to recent research and evidence, it looks unlikely that we'll ever find definitive evidence of their existence. Science says they can explain Sasquatch sightings, and this is how. Biologists who study wildlife using camera traps, which are set up in remote areas to capture images of passing animals, have long attempted to find elusive species. These cameras detect movement and snap pictures, providing invaluable data on the biodiversity of different ecosystems. As camera traps collect more photos over time, the number of species recorded grows. However, after a while, the number plateaus, suggesting that no new species are being detected. While it's impossible to claim 100% certainty, researchers say that after significant camera deployment, it's safe to say the likelihood of discovering new species, especially large ones like Bigfoot or the Yeti, drops significantly. Camera trap studies have been running for years in regions where these creatures are rumored to live, but so far, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Instead, the supposed proof of Bigfoot or the Yeti often comes from blurry photos or shaky videos taken by individuals who claim to have encountered them. The scientific understanding of biology also makes the existence of Bigfoot highly unlikely. Often described as a great ape, Bigfoot would have had to evolve in North America. However, great apes evolved in Africa, and the only great ape to make it to the Americas is Homo sapiens, whose ancestors crossed the Bering Strait only about 16,000 years ago. This is far too short a time for a new species like Bigfoot to have evolved. While it may be disappointing for these mysterious creature enthusiasts, the scientific evidence points firmly toward the conclusion that creatures like Bigfoot and the Yeti are more fantasy than reality. After decades of extensive scientific research, it's safe to say that yes, science has solved the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster, and it's pure fiction. So, what do you think? So, there's a mysterious doorway in the middle of Antarctica. Some people think it's Bigfoot's vacation home, or a shuttlecraft from Star Trek, or maybe a door to Agartha, a mythical kingdom some people believe is located in the center of the Earth. Well, the scientists debunked all these poetic theories and explained that what looks like a mysterious doorway is located in an area of fast sea ice. It's offshore of the coast and is full of little islands with shallow water around them. When ice flows around hard rocks hidden underneath, it can create patterns that look odd but are totally normal. In this spot, the ice is thin, so the rocks underneath have a big effect on how the ice moves. The cold winds in Antarctica also shape the ice and snow and make it look like they're lines and shapes. So, the mysterious doorway is just a rocky ridge poking out because the ice has melted a little. The top of the doorway is the tip of the rock, and the sides are snowy trails left by strong winds blowing in the same direction. It's essentially an iceberg that got stranded and is melting in one place. One YouTuber found another out-of-place mysterious object more than 150 miles off the shore of Antarctica, a 400-foot-long ice ship. The internet went wild with theories like that the ship must have ended up there right from the Bermuda Triangle. But there was no scientific proof that it was a ship and not just a large chunk of ice. And once some other internet users revisited the place, they noticed the ice melted in the summer and the hypothetical ship was gone. Another mysterious Google Maps find in Antarctica was a pyramid. And before you make up an exciting theory about how the ancient Egyptians built a secret base here, I have to tell you it turned out to be just a mountain. It's part of the tallest mountain range in Antarctica that stretches for almost 250 miles. It's not the first pyramid on this continent, as explorers from the British Antarctic Expedition found another unusually shaped mountain and nicknamed it the Pyramid. But this one didn't even have a pyramid shape. Here's one Antarctic find that definitely won't disappoint you: a giant ice shelf that reminded scientists of the Grand Canyon. A special submarine robot named RAN covered over 600 miles under the thick ice and brought back some amazing footage of icy mountains, valleys, flat plateaus, and swirly patterns made entirely of ice. One of the strangest things RAN found was giant bowl-shaped holes, or scoops, in the ice. Sadly, scientists lost track of the robot. They think that curious Weddell seals may have accidentally bumped into RAN and caused it to get stuck. To save energy, RAN probably shut itself down, and the scientists couldn't find it again. But the team is hoping to build a new robot and continue exploring this icy canyon to see how the patterns under the ice might change over the years. Another huge Antarctic canyon was found thanks to bad weather. A team of sound experts had to pause their work at the Casey Research Station in a storm. Instead of waiting around, they decided to use the unexpected free time to map the seafloor near Adams Glacier. And that's how they found a canyon that is almost 7,000 feet deep, almost 30,000 feet wide, and stretches over 28 miles away from the glacier. During the mapping, they discovered just part of the canyon before they had to go back to the research station. But when bad weather came in again, the ship went back and mapped more of the canyon. They were working in waves up to 13 feet high and super powerful winds, but they managed to get about 15 hours of data to complete their map. On the way back to Australia, they stopped one last time, and now they've got a full picture of the canyon. Studying it is helping scientists learn more about the history of glaciers and the interaction between the Antarctic ice sheet and the ocean. Now, there's a frozen lake in Antarctica called Lake Enigma. For a long time, people thought the lake was completely frozen solid. But during one expedition, researchers found that under the thick ice, there was a layer of liquid water about 40 feet deep. To learn more, they drilled through the ice and sent down a camera to explore what was hiding in the lake's depths. The lake's water, which they think comes from the nearby amorphous glacier through a secret underground pathway, was filled with strange microbial life. These tiny microbes lived in mats that covered the lake bed. Some of the mats were thin and spiky, and others looked like crumpled carpets, or even small tree-like shapes that grew up to 16 inches. Many of the microbes could make their own food through photosynthesis, just like plants do, and it gave the lake a high amount of oxygen. One of the coolest discoveries was a type of microbe which usually lives in low-oxygen places. Lake Enigma might be similar to environments on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, so it could mean that these moons also have hidden water under their ice and possibly microbial life too. One more mind-boggling discovery from Antarctica is tiny pieces of amber in mudstone, found here for the very first time. It took scientists years of studying incredibly well-preserved fossilized roots, pollen, and spores that they found back in 2017. Amber proves that resin-producing trees once grew in Antarctica, part of a lush rainforest that existed near the South Pole during the mid-Cretaceous period. Back then, disclaimer, I wasn't around then, the trees would have had to survive through months of darkness during the long Antarctic winters. Scientists believe they adapted by going dormant for a long time. The amber pieces the scientists found are tiny, but they are beautiful shades of yellow and orange with bumpy surfaces that show how the resin flowed out of the trees. This resin likely leaked out to protect the trees from insects. It was preserved because water quickly covered it and kept it safe from sunlight and air. A scientist was browsing through satellite images for brown trails of penguin waste and found 4 new colonies of emperor penguins at the base of the globe. These new colonies likely have been around for years, though 3 of them are rather small, with fewer than 1,000 breeding penguins each. One of the new colonies was found close to a place called the Lazarev Ice Shelf, where there used to be a larger penguin colony. They thought this colony went extinct in 2019, but it seems the penguins have just moved a bit because of changing sea ice conditions. So studying them can help us learn more about how emperor penguins adapt to changes in the environment. Now, there used to be a giant river system in Antarctica 40 million years ago. Researchers found proof of it after studying soft sediments and hard rocks from the frozen seabed. They looked at tiny bits of radioactive elements, like uranium and lead, and learned that the deeper dirt came from the time of dinosaurs. The dirt closer to the surface was younger and had an interesting pattern, like the kind you see in river deltas today, such as in the Mississippi River or Rio Grande. Scientists found tiny signs of life in the sand. The river that once flowed here started in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains and traveled 930 miles before it reached the sea. Researchers kept studying newer layers of dirt from about 20 million years ago. They hope this will help them predict what the Earth's weather patterns might be like in the future.
A loaded Boeing 777 bound for China vanishes into thin air. An eerie monolith suddenly appears in the middle of Utah's desert, only to disappear just as mysteriously. And one of Hollywood's most famous cars, James Bond's iconic Aston Martin DB5, has been missing since 1997. But one burning question remains. How can such massive things just disappear without a trace? Buckle up, because we're about to dive into these wild mysteries and explore what might be hiding right under our noses. The 18.5-inch high bust of Queen Nefertiti is housed in the Neues Museum in Berlin. Apparently, she was like the Beyoncé of ancient Egypt. Absolutely flawless, with high cheekbones, a slender nose, and that mysterious smile, all carved in limestone. But wait, where's her eyeball? Or rather, her iris? Yep, her left eye is just an empty socket staring into eternity. But take a closer look at the iris of the right eye. That, my friend, is quartz. At first, the archaeologist who found it assumed that the crystal had fallen out. So the team tried their absolute best to get it back. But they couldn't find it anywhere, which opened up space for other mysterious theories about its disappearance. Specialists thought that maybe in real life, Nefertiti had some ancient eye infection or a rare disease. But it turns out, nah. This theory probably isn't right, because other statues of her show the left eyeball. So maybe the artist got lazy and only finished one eye, or they just abandoned their studio. I mean, who doesn't feel like ditching work sometimes, saying, "I quit"? Or maybe this bust was just a demo model for official portraits, showing future sculptors how to carve the internal structure of the eye. I know it's hard to believe that this beautiful bust was just a prop for an art class. After all, it is ranked as a masterpiece of craftsmanship. But this theory has some backing. The unpainted sides of the shoulders are listed as the second clue that this bust was meant to be a model. But was it really? Well, nobody can prove it. All we know is that when the bust was found, the eye was already missing, as if it never even had one. So the mystery is still very much alive. From one ancient queen to another, but more modern. Yep, I guess we can say that. I'm talking about Queen Victoria. More precisely, about her missing parliamentary mace, a symbol of authority that's been lost since 1891. Here's the scoop. The 5-foot-long staff, made of silver and topped with a thin overlay of gold, was securely locked away after a late-night assembly. But by the afternoon, it had vanished without a trace. The prime suspect was Thomas Jeffrey, an engineer who was seen leaving the Parliament House with a large, noisy package. Jeffrey claimed it was just scrap metal for his workshop. Then there's a theory about a builder using an open window to sneak in and open the case, though the fingerprints on the windowsill led nowhere. And let's not forget the prankster rumor. Apparently, someone might have borrowed the mace for a joke and forgotten where they had left it. Finally, there's this wild tale of a group of Melbourne ladies supposedly taking it and tossing it into the Maribyrnong River. Despite all the wild theories, the mace is still missing. We still don't know who took it or if any of those suspects were actually involved. But whoever grabbed it probably thought it was some kind of valuable treasure. In reality, it was almost worthless, costing Parliament less than £300. Sure, that's about $50,000 today, which is not bad at all. But what I'm saying is, if the suspect was trying to get rich, it would have been a lot easier and more profitable to take any silverware or plates from the speaker's room. In 2020, a shiny metal monolith suddenly appeared in the Utah desert, like a sci-fi prop that got lost. Standing about 9.8 feet tall, it looked like it was waiting for cosmic entities or a film crew to show up. But instead of that, the monolith took center stage in a real-life mystery. The monolith was found by a helicopter pilot doing an annual bighorn sheep count above a rugged area in the desert. Soon after, the monolith's eerie appearance grabbed the media's attention, sparking all sorts of wild theories. Most of them, of course, involved extraterrestrials. But my absolute favorite is that this piece was created by an avant-garde artist who's really into 2001: A Space Odyssey. While everyone was scratching their heads, a photographer reported seeing 4 guys come in, break the monolith apart, and make off with the pieces in a wheelbarrow. Yep, they literally rolled away with it. One of them even said, "Leave no trace," as if they were auditioning for a secret agent role. That means that while some were dreaming of interstellar visitors, the real action was probably much more down to earth. Still, the Utah monolith mystery remains unsolved. Nobody knows exactly who took it, and no one has seen it since. Yeah, that's right. Although people claim to have seen it being destroyed, one theory suggests that this strange piece might still be intact in the backyard of one of the suspects. The Florentine diamond is a pale yellow gem, weighing a whopping 137 carats. That's about the size of a small walnut, which makes it huge compared to the typical diamonds you find in jewelry stores. Unfortunately, this historical gem is missing, and its story sounds like it was ripped straight from an adventure novel. It all started in the 15th century with Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. I mean, we think so because its origins are still disputed. Theory number 1 says that when Charles met his unfortunate end, he was wearing the diamond. Then, a peasant or a soldier allegedly saw the yellow rock and thought it was just glass, selling it at a very cheap price. Not a great deal, especially since if this diamond were auctioned today, it could be worth more than $20 million. Some people think that this story is just a tale, because the first historical reference to the diamond comes much later, in 1657, when French traveler Jean-Baptiste Tavernier described a large gem owned by Ferdinand II de' Medici, the Grand Duke of Tuscany. So, that takes us to theory number 2. When the last Medici passed away, the Habsburg family put their hands on the gem, making it part of the Austrian crown jewels. When the empire collapsed, Emperor Charles I of Austria allegedly took the diamond with him into exile. In 1918, someone close to the imperial family decided to borrow the diamond, if you know what I mean, and took it to South America, along with other crown jewels. So, the Florentine diamond could have been part of a royal gem heist, but as a victim, I guess. Rumor has it that in the 20s, the diamond somehow made its way to the United States, received a bit of a makeover by being recut, and was sold off. But was it really? Well, no one knows. From priceless diamonds to cold Coke. Honestly, on a scorching summer day, a refreshing drink feels just as valuable. Next on our list is a mystery soda machine. This vintage gem popped up in Capitol Hill, Seattle, sometime in the late 90s. And let me tell you, it was like no other. People used to say that it had a bunch of mystery buttons that, instead of your usual Coke or Sprite, dispensed some pretty strange and elusive flavors. Imagine the fun of pressing a button and wondering if you'd get ginger ale, grape soda, or something bizarrely new. No one knew exactly who stocked the machine. Over time, locals spun legends that it was haunted or had a mind of its own. This mysterious Coke machine became so famous in Seattle that it had its own Facebook page with over 24,000 followers. Then, in June 2018, it vanished with a note saying, "Went for a walk." Theories flew about where the soda machine went, from the Space Needle to a secret life somewhere else. Unfortunately, despite a few faux sightings, the machine remains lost. If that's not the coolest, most enigmatic vending machine ever, I don't know what is. Let's suppose you're strolling along the beach in Hamamatsu City, Japan, soaking up the sun and listening to the waves, when, out of nowhere, you spot a 5-foot wide metal sphere. Most people would probably freak out, thinking it's a spy balloon, a mysterious aircraft, or, I don't know, a Dragon Ball. This exact scenario happened to one guy last year. He probably thought it was just a weird beach ball, so he tried to push it. Naturally, it didn't move one bit. A month later, this giant metal ball was making headlines worldwide because no one had any clue where it came from. The local police, suspecting it might be dangerous, closed off the beach and got busy with X-rays. Eventually, once they realized it wasn't dangerous, the officials just decided to move the mysterious ball out of there. They said it would be stored for a certain period of time and then disposed of. But people are still scratching their heads about where it ended up. I mean, those words were pretty vague, and the authorities never exactly said what they did with it. I know we've been chatting about single items up to this point, but things are about to escalate. Over a dozen sculptures, murals, and installations have vanished in Baltimore, and nobody seems to have a clue why. Take The Guide, for example, a 15-foot tall sculpture that stood proudly outside Baltimore City College for more than 30 years. One day in 2014, the city's art conservator shows up and, surprise, surprise, the sculpture is gone. But wait, how does a massive steel sculpture just disappear like that? Did no one see this happen? Well, apparently not. And this wasn't a one-off. Since 1992, 14 artworks have disappeared or been found in a sad state. Although some people have been investigating the case, so far, nobody has any idea what happened or where the works are. Maybe they were taken by some high-stakes art collectors, or perhaps someone thought they could use them as fancy garden gnomes. It's hard to think of anything more mysterious than an airplane disappearing without a trace. You have probably heard of Amelia Earhart, the groundbreaking American aviator who became a true legend. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean, making a daring trip from Canada to Northern Ireland. Then, in 1935, she was the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the US mainland, completing a dangerous 2,408-mile flight that had already claimed several lives. She also became the first female vice president of the National Aeronautic Association. Her list of records goes on. So let's just say she's got a bit obsessed with pushing boundaries. But her ultimate goal was to be the first woman to fly all the way around the world. So in 1937, she took off on this epic journey in a Lockheed Electra 10E. But things went horribly wrong. During a flight from Leh to Honolulu, communication problems and faulty tracking led to her disappearing over the Pacific Ocean. Despite tons of sea and air searches, neither she nor her plane was ever found, making it one of aviation's biggest mysteries. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 is kind of like today's version of Amelia Earhart's missing plane. On March 2014, a Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur, heading for Beijing, but it never made it. It vanished from air traffic control screens, but military radar briefly picked it up when it strayed off course before disappearing completely. Picture a massive, high-tech search operation stretching from the South China Sea all the way to the Indian Ocean. What's really weird about this whole thing is that even with a huge search effort, both in the air and at sea, we still don't know exactly what happened. Theories range from the pilot intentionally crashing the plane and mechanical failure to an elaborate hijacking, but nothing concrete has turned up. The only thing we know is that the last confirmed signals from the plane pointed to a remote part of the Indian Ocean, and that's pretty much it. The next mode of transportation on our list became legendary thanks to the movies. There it is. It's James Bond's iconic Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger. This wasn't just any car. It was a superstar, complete with a hidden telephone, an ejector seat, tire shredders. It had more tricks up its sleeve than Bond himself. But on June 18, 1997, this famous DB5 vanished from a hangar in Florida. That's right, it just disappeared like a magic trick gone wrong. At that time, the car was owned by businessman and car collector Anthony Pugliese III and was worth a whopping $7 to $10 million. It wasn't the best disappearing act, though. Tire drag marks on the floor leading out of the hangar made investigators think the car was probably hauled out by its axles and loaded onto a flatbed truck. If that was the case, the thieves likely waited until after dark to make their move. Now, onto the theories. Some folks think it was shipped off to a secret lair, maybe a swanky palace in the Middle East. Others believe it might have been sunk into the ocean, Bond style. There's even a rumor that Pugliese himself hid the DB5 in a warehouse in New Jersey. Despite a six-figure reward and a detective hot on the case, the legendary car's whereabouts are still a mystery. The list of missing Hollywood props doesn't stop there, and Tony Stark might need to file a police report. In 2018, the original Iron Man suit worn by Robert Downey Jr. simply vanished from a warehouse in Los Angeles. That iconic red and gold suit from the 2008 Iron Man film, valued at $325,000, just poof, disappeared. You'd think if someone took it for the money, they'd grab more stuff from the prop storage, right? Come on, that place was full of objects from Hollywood. But nope, the suit was the only thing that disappeared. With no suspects in sight and no other items reported missing, this possible heist feels like it could have been pulled off by Thanos himself. You know, if he wasn't, well, fictional. The last item on our list is out of this world. And I mean quite literally. Back in the 70s, after Apollo 17, astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt picked up a moon rock and decided to share a piece with the world. I mean, why not, right? So authorities chopped up the rock. Actually, there were 3 different sources and sent 270 pieces as gifts to different nations around the globe. Fast forward to today, and over half of these Goodwill moon rocks have vanished. Some of them simply disappeared, while others just got tossed in the trash. As strange as it might sound, Ireland's moon rock ended up in Dublin's garbage dump after a fire at an observatory. Joseph Guttheins, a former NASA agent who became a moon rock detective, has been on a quest to recover those cosmic gifts. He even offered $10,000 for Malta's missing moon rock, but it still hasn't been found. Apparently, the moon rocks are like celestial treasures. So, if you've got a rogue moon rock hanging around, you might want to check if it's on Guttheins' radar.
It was the beginning of the 20th century. and two rivals, Robert Scott and Roald Amundsen, set on their expeditions to become the first people in history to reach the South Pole. The race wasn't easy, and it ended tragically for Scott. Amundsen has won and set his tent on the pole before his rivals. A member of Scott's expedition known as Terra Nova, British geologist Thomas Griffith Taylor, not only survived the harsh conditions, but also made an unexpected discovery. He found a waterfall of what appeared to be blood at the rocky base of the glacier, which now has his name, in 1911. It took scientists more than a century to figure out what is behind the eerie coloring. A team of American scientists journeyed to Taylor Glacier with powerful electron microscopes to analyze its contents. Previous studies had scratched the surface of the Crimson Enigma, but no one had previously done a full-scale analysis of its mineralogical makeup. These researchers unleashed a whole arsenal of analytical equipment and spotted little iron-rich nanospheres. These teeny-tiny particles, 1/100th the size of human red blood cells, originate from ancient microbes. They flourish abundantly in the meltwaters of Taylor Glacier. These nanospheres are jam-packed with iron, silicon, calcium, aluminum, and sodium, forming a unique composition that paints the subglacial water a vivid shade of red. These nanospheres don't have the usual crystalline structure found in minerals, which is why previous detection methods failed to spot them. Taylor Glacier's icy depths harbor an ancient microbial community that has thrived in isolation for thousands or possibly even millions of years. This discovery could help us in the search for life outside of Earth. Dr. Ken Levy, a research scientist at Johns Hopkins University, has some impressive expertise in planetary materials and the analysis of Martian samples. He decided to find out what would happen if a Mars rover landed in Antarctica. Could it figure out what makes bloodfalls so mesmerizingly red? So, researchers treated bloodfalls as a simulated Martian landing site. They used techniques inspired by the rovers exploring the red planet. The samples they collected were sent to Johns Hopkins processing facilities. There, Livy unleashed the power of transmission electron microscopy and revealed the enigmatic nanospheres. He made the conclusion that our current methods of analyzing other planets' surfaces with rovers fall short. They can't unravel the true nature of environmental materials, especially on chilly planets like Mars. These materials might be super tiny and non-crystalline, throwing off our detection methods. To truly grasp the essence of rocky planets, we'll need transmission electron microscopes. Strapping one onto a Mars rover isn't feasible yet, but it could mean a start of a new era in space exploration. Have you ever seen a waterfall on fire? Every February, when the stars align just right, Horsetail Fall in Yosemite National Park gets a sensational makeover. As the sun sets, its rays hit the waterfall at the perfect angle, transforming it into a blazing display of vibrant orange and red hues. We don't know exactly who and when discovered this natural miracle. The original valley dwellers may have known about it, but they kept it to themselves. It wasn't until 1973 that photographer Galen Rowell captured the first known photo of the waterfall, bringing it into the limelight. Since then, the firefall has become a global sensation, spreading like wildfire on social media and drawing crowds from far and wide. This magnificent cascade draws hundreds of spectators every year, but they can only see the show under certain conditions. First things first, Horsetail Fall needs a flowing stream. If there's not enough snowpack in February, the waterfall won't have enough water to create the magic. The temperatures must be warm enough to melt the snowpack during the day. If it's too chilly, the snow will stay frozen, and the fiery spectacle won't ignite. Second, we need a clear western sky at sunset. Those sunbeams need a straight path to hit Horsetail Fall and make it come alive. And since the weather in Yosemite is ever-changing, clouds can magically clear up just in time for the show. If all the conditions are just right, you'll witness the Yosemite firefall in all its glory for about 10 minutes. The mystery of the sailing stones in California's Death Valley National Park has puzzled scientists for years. Heavy stones seem to have a mind of their own and move across Racetrack Playa, a dried-up lake bed. They leave behind a trail on the cracked mud. There were all kinds of theories to explain this phenomenon, From magnetic fields or dust devils, which are strong whirlwinds, to mischievous pranksters. No one has actually witnessed these rocks in action, which only added to the mystery. In 2006, a NASA scientist named Ralph Lorenz entered the scene. He was studying weather conditions on other planets, but he couldn't resist the allure of Death Valley and those elusive sailing stones. He had an eureka moment while tinkering at his kitchen table with a Tupperware container. Lorenz filled the container with water, leaving a small rock poking out, and chucked it in the freezer. Then he placed this icy construction in a big tray of water with sand at the bottom and gently blew on it. The rock began to glide across the water, leaving a trail in the sand. Lorenz had been studying how ice can make big rocks float and move along tidal beaches in the Arctic Sea. Applying this knowledge, he and his research team figured out that, under certain winter conditions in Death Valley, enough water and ice could form to make the rocks float across racetrack playa in a light breeze. And as they glided, they left their mark in the muddy terrain. The River of Five Colors, Cano Cristales in Colombia, has the unofficial title of the most beautiful river in the world. For most of the year, it looks like any other regular river. The real magic happens between the wet and dry seasons, when the water level is just perfect. This unique river floor is lined with a special plant, and when the conditions are right, it bursts into a dazzling display of colors. Think vibrant reds, stunning yellows, and lush greens, all mingling with the blue water. It's like stepping into a living rainbow with 1,000 shades in between. This phenomenal display only lasts for a few weeks, from September through November. During Colombia's wet season, the river flows too fast and deep, covering up the river floor and denying the plant the sunlight it needs to turn red. And in the dry season, there's simply not enough water to support the vibrant life in the river. So you have to catch it at just the right time. The reason behind Maldivian beaches glowing in the dark at night isn't a mystery, but it doesn't make them any less impressive. It happens thanks to the bioluminescent plankton. These tiny creatures are like little underwater disco balls, emitting a cool blue glow when they are agitated or on the move. Imagine walking along the shoreline and leaving behind glowing footprints. You can even take a night swim amongst these magical plankton. Researchers have discovered that their bioluminescence is actually a clever defense mechanism against predators. When these microorganisms flash their little blue lights, it disorients and surprises their attackers. The plankton produces this light using a chemical called luciferin. These enchanting plankton can appear at any time of the year. The best chances of seeing them in all their glowing glory are from June to December. During this period, there's a higher volume of plankton in the seas of the Maldives, creating the perfect conditions for a luminous show after the sun sets and the night sky takes over. You'll only witness the magic of bioluminescent plankton when tidal currents bring them close to the shore in large numbers. It's hard to predict exactly when this spectacular show will happen, so make sure to do your research and prepare to take photos with a high ISO to capture it, exactly like it looks in travel catalogs.
If you ever fly over the deserts of southern Peru, you'll notice distinct white lines against the rusty red background. Look closer, and you'll see some clear shapes. Straight lines, rectangles, triangles, swirls. It seems like they're parts of huge drawings. You notice a monkey, a whale, a condor, a hummingbird, and whatnot. The lines were created more than 2,000 years ago by the people of the Nazca culture. Thanks to a dry climate and strong winds in the desert, most of the Nazca lines are visible today. To create them, the Nazca people removed the top layer of pebbles and revealed the soil beneath the ground. The color of the soil changes from reddish-brown to yellowish-gray, so the lines always look different. It looks like the creators of the lines started with small-scale models and increased the proportions to create full-scale designs. Scientists have tried to decipher the meaning of the Nazca lines ever since they were first discovered in the 1920s. But the first mention of the lines was actually much earlier, in the 16th century Chronicle of Peru, where they were described as trail markers in the desert. Since you can't really study the lines and their symbolism from the ground, The lines became world famous only in the 1930s with the advent of commercial planes. A decade later, American professor Paul Kosak was doing his research on the lines and noticed one interesting thing. When he looked up from the line, it was pointing directly at the setting sun. It happened one day after the winter solstice, and the scientists concluded that the lines must be the largest astronomy book in the world. German scientist Maria Reiche, who got the nickname the Lady of the Lines, supported the theory that the geoglyphs served as a calendar and had some sort of astronomical purposes. She dedicated 40 years of her life to studying the lines and swept them inch by inch. She also moved into a small house close to the lines to protect them from unwanted visitors. Then in the 1970s, American researchers called the astronomy-related theory into question. They noted that in a region like Nazca, one of the driest places on Earth with only around 20 minutes of rain per year, water is a real treasure, and the straight lines and trapezoids must have had something to do with it. They could be pointing at locations for rituals that the local people organized to obtain water and make crops more fertile. The images of animals in the Andes region are also related to water. Spiders are thought to be a sign of rain. Hummingbirds stand for fertility, and monkeys living in the Amazon symbolize an abundance of water. In more recent years, the Nazca lines have become the research ground for archaeologists from Yamagata University. They're using high-resolution aerial photography and drones to discover and catalog geoglyphs. The team has identified a total of 358 geoglyphs so far, and 168 out of them in 2022 alone. They found images of humans, camelids, birds, orca whales, cats, and snakes, most likely created between 100 BCE and 300 CE. Some of the images are around 10 to 20 feet long, so it's no wonder no one was able to detect them before. The largest geoglyphs, by comparison, are 1,200 feet across, which is about the height of the Empire State Building. The researchers believe the Nazca lines were used as a form of communication in the desert. The linear ones pointed the direction from valley to valley. The ones drawn on slopes seem to have been drawn along ancient pathways between settlements. The scientists now plan to find patterns in the geoglyphs depending on their distribution. They use artificial intelligence to analyze the images. The AI generates designs that are likely to be painted in the desert, and the team then checks if they're actually among the Nazca lines. Another famous Peruvian geoglyph is a candelabra, slightly taller than the Washington Monument. You can find it on a seaside hill in the Paracas Peninsula. Researchers managed to establish the approximate age of the candelabra by analyzing the nearby artifacts. It looks like it dates back to around 200 BCE. The drawing is etched deep into the sand, and it was never meant to look like a candelabra. One theory says that the drawing was supposed to resemble the trident of an Incan deity to please it. Another popular theory is that sailors used it as a beacon for navigation. Effigy Mounds National Monument on the Mississippi River has 195 known Native American mounds. Most of them are conical in shape, and there are also several that look like birds, deer, turtles, bears, and panthers. Scientists have established that the mounds date back to around 450 BCE, and the images are somewhat younger. A study of the mounds found some copper, bone, and stone tools. The builders' descendants say that the mounds served as ceremonial sites. This story is passed down from generation to generation. Some historians believe the mounds could have been also used to mark celestial events or territories. The American Southwest and the nearby regions of Mexico have over 300 intaglios, which are giant images engraved in the ground. The most famous of them are the Blythe intaglios in California, west of the Colorado River. Blythe giants are a group of 6 figures, including that of a human being and an animal. Scientists believe the images are somewhere between 450 and 2,000 years old. According to the local Mojave tribe, there is an image of Mustamho, the creator of life. The animal figure shows a mountain lion who served as his helper. The largest figure is almost as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa. The creators of the intaglios had to scrape the dark rock of the desert until the lighter soil showed up. It's nearly impossible to notice them from ground level. That's why they were only discovered in the 1930s, when a pilot flying over them accidentally looked down. The best way to see the giants is still from a helicopter. Kazakhstan can boast its own Nazca lines, a cluster of around 260 earthworks in the north of the country. The steppe geoglyphs are a variety of geometric shapes, including squares, crosses, circles, and a three-pronged design. The creators of the images used materials such as dirt, rocks, and lumber to build them out of the ground. A local economist first spotted the geoglyphs while browsing Google Earth in 2007. Archaeologists suppose that the structures go back 8,000 years, but they still don't know who built them or why. One theory says that the lines helped track the sun's movement. NASA got interested in the discovery since the lines are much older than the ones in Peru. They took photos of the steppe geoglyphs from space, trying to solve their mystery. Another fact that makes the lines so special is how huge they are. One of the largest of them has sides as long as an aircraft carrier. The only humans who could have built them must have been the nomadic Stone Age tribes, but it's unlikely that they had such advanced tools. If they did, that would mean that archaeologists need to rethink the abilities of our long-ago ancestors. Organizing such a huge amount of people to work together on a complicated project is an amazing feat. Although the white horse on a lush green hill in Oxfordshire, England, could easily pass for modern art, it's actually one of the most ancient geoglyphs. It was created between the Bronze and Iron Ages and is the oldest chalk-cut hill figure in Britain. Whoever created it had to remove the turf to reveal the chalky white part of the soil. Scientists can only guess why this piece of art was created. It could have been a fertility symbol or a way to mark territory. Aerial images prove that the horse has changed over time because of the soil. It took several centuries to reveal a larger horse-like shape that lies under what we see now.
Now, you've heard of the strange Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, right? But wait, there's a new mystery to be solved. In the heart of Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood sits the world's most mysterious vending machine. It looks like it comes straight out of the 80s, and the weirdest part, nobody knows how it got there. Despite having no clear owner, the supernatural machine is fully functional and will shoot out a refreshing soda for just 75 cents. But you won't be getting your usual yummy selection. The cans that pop out of it are all drinks that haven't been seen in the US since the 80s. If you're feeling extra brave, there's a button marked Mystery, which will dispense a completely random can of soda. One guy spent $5 on the mystery button, and the spooky machine popped out 6 entirely different brands of soda, none of which had their own button. There are rumors of Hubba Bubba soda and even bacon-flavored cola coming out of the vendor. Even weirder, one day, the regular buttons from the machine all vanished and were replaced with the uniform mystery buttons. Whenever the machine breaks, it's always fixed almost immediately, but no one ever sees this happening. So where do the sodas come from? Who stocks them? And the most important part, who's getting all the money? It looks like we'll never find out, as back in June 2018, the vending machine vanished into thin air. All that's left in its spot is a note that reads, "Went for a walk." No one has seen it since the day it disappeared. Some people think the machine belonged to the owners of Broadway Locksmith, the store behind which the vendor was located. This would make sense. It was linked up to the store's power supply and was locked with a lock sold in the store. But the locksmiths have always denied this and said that, like everyone else, they've never seen anyone open the machine. They might be telling the truth, as Seattle vending machine permit officials revealed that there are no official records of the vending machine ever existing or being linked to the store. Well, it's hard to keep tabs on a vanishing vending machine. The legend of the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait has puzzled experts for over 200 years. There have been numerous sightings of a mystery ship with 3 or 4 masts and pure white sails. It appears off the coast of Canada, and according to local folklore, the mystery ship emerges right before a storm. The weirdest part? The ship is said to be completely engulfed in flames. Legend has it that in 1900, a group of sailors raced toward the phantom ship in a small rowboat. They were aiming to rescue the crew, but only ended up watching the ship suddenly vanish before their eyes. In 2008, a boy reported seeing an unexplained bright white and gold ship, which vanished into thin air. There have been so many eyewitness accounts across the last 200 years, all of which give the exact same description of the phantom ship. One explanation is that the legend came about due to natural electrical phenomenon. That's pretty much lightning to you and me. Some say these flashes of bright light led to people seeing the illusion of a ship. Others believe that moonlight reflecting off thick fog is causing people to see things which aren't there. Have you ever danced the night away? Well, in the 16th century, Strasbourg, France danced the entire summer away. The townspeople were seemingly struck by a sudden and uncontrollable urge to dance, which lasted 3 months. It all started when some woman stepped into the street and began to inexplicably bust a move. She kept dancing for an entire week, and before long, dozens of people joined her. The bizarre episode began in July and didn't end until September. There are stories of similar manias happening in Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. One theory is that a stress-induced hysteria took over the city. Another suggests that the dancers were part of a super weird movement. Theory number 3 suggests that the townspeople accidentally ate some toxic mold that produced wild hallucinations. Dance fever? In 2020, a star completely vanished from the night sky with zero explanation. Astronomers had had the star on their radar for around 20 years as it had an eerie blue glow. The star even shone brighter than the sun. Some say it vanished into a black hole, but that would result in a massive explosion called a supernova that we'd have definitely spotted. Others say that the star lost some of its mass, or that huge amounts of space dust are blocking the view. Hey, down in front, I'm watching a star here. For years, residents of the small city of Taos, New Mexico have been haunted by a low-frequency noise drifting in with the desert's air. But it's not all residents. Only 2% report hearing the strange noise. And even those people describe it very differently. Some believe the sounds are caused by weird acoustics in the area. Others think it's mass hysteria, while some think there's a spookier reason. To this day, no one has ever found the source of the mysterious hum. You're walking alone in the woods and suddenly stumble across a random staircase that comes out of nowhere and doesn't go anywhere either. There are hundreds of reports of these random staircases in forests all over the world, from the US, Italy, Cambodia, and the Philippines. The staircases don't seem abandoned. They're usually well cleaned and free of vegetation. They never appear at the edges of forests either. It's always deep in the heart, usually several miles from any town. The legend of the stairs takes a creepy turn as they almost always appear in areas where someone has disappeared. People claim to have even seen the stairs move. One man climbed some stairs hidden deep in the woods to escape a stray dog. While he claims he was only up there for 5 minutes, legend suggests that he'd been gone for 5 years. More and more sightings of these mysterious staircases are appearing, but despite new evidence, it seems we're no closer to finding out where they're appearing from or why. In Seattle, back in 1954, there was a bizarre windshield pitting galore. Residents began seeing holes and dents in their car windshields. Police initially believed it to be a kid causing trouble with a BB device, but the same thing began happening in other nearby towns. By April, over 3,000 cases of cracked windshields had been reported before the unexplained event abruptly stopped. Some people think the unexplained damage came from a new transmitter at a local radio station. They were convinced the radio waves were damaging the glass. Others believed it to be the work of sand fleas who burrowed into the windshields. Cosmic rays is another popular theory, but it was never actually confirmed whether the windshields were even cracked in the first place. Most reports suggest that the residents imagined the whole incident, but no one knows why. In November 2020, an unexplained metal monolith was discovered in a remote area of the Red Rock Canyon State Park in Utah. People were left baffled by the strange object, but just days later, it vanished. Some people say that the object was removed because its random appearance sparked so much media coverage with links to aliens and other supernatural theories. But the authorities denied ever moving the structure. Stranger still, less than 2 weeks after people stumbled across the first bizarre creation, a second monolith was discovered nearly halfway across the planet. A third one soon appeared in California, with a fourth appearing in New Mexico but vanishing the very same day. No one knows where the monoliths came from or why, or if more will ever appear. A world-renowned Swedish diving team were searching for sunken treasure in the Gulf of Bothnia when they stumbled across a 200-foot object which was covered in unnatural or alien-looking symbols. There was so much electrical energy in the area at the time that the divers couldn't snap a clear shot of the mysterious object. The perfectly round disc on the ocean floor looked eerily like a UFO. The divers, some of whom had 20 years of experience, reported having never seen anything quite like it before. Known as the Baltic Sea anomaly, the origins of this object and what it actually is are yet to be discovered. Some mountains look so picture-perfect that you'd swear they were hand-sculpted by a divine architect. And the thing is, you're not that wrong if you think so. Wait, did someone really build mountains? Hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest, there's a bizarre cone-shaped peak that raises that exact question. And halfway across the world, there's a landscape that looks like someone spilled a massive bag of Hershey Kisses across a green field. No, you can't make this stuff up. Get ready to learn what would happen if a Hershey's Kiss and the Road to El Dorado movie had a baby in real life, because we're diving into two of the most mysterious and oddly satisfying natural formations on Earth, Cerro El Cono in Peru and the Chocolate Hills in the Philippines. One might be an ancient lost pyramid, and the other turns into chocolate every year. Well, sort of. Let's start with El Cono. This strange, solitary mountain rises more than 1,300 feet above the treetops in the heart of the Amazon, right near the Peru-Brazil border. Sure, the Amazon is no stranger to mountains. There are impressive ranges, like the Ameri Mountains farther north and the Andes, not in the Amazon per se, but running along Peru's spine. But you see, El Cono is different. For starters, it's completely isolated. If you fly over the region in a helicopter, all you'll see for miles is an endless emerald sea of rainforest. Then, boom, out of nowhere, a perfectly cone-shaped mountain juts into the sky like a giant green Dorito. It's not part of any major mountain chain, it doesn't have any siblings, and it looks so symmetrical that it almost feels artificial. And it's covered by forest. Now, naturally, this has sparked all kinds of theories. Some people think it's an extinct volcano. Others say it's a freak of erosion. And then there are those who whisper more exciting possibilities. What if it's a lost pyramid? And before you roll your eyes, this idea is not as wild as it sounds. And some people actually stand by this theory. After all, the ancient civilizations of South America built pyramids too. What? Yeah, can you believe that the Egyptians didn't actually invent the concept of pyramids? No joke. The Mochichachapoya and Inca civilizations all built monumental structures. In fact, pyramids are found all over the world, from Ethiopia and Thailand to Greece, Mexico, and even Italy. So why do pyramids keep popping up throughout history? Simple. They're structurally sound. The broad base supports the weight, and the pointed top was often seen as a symbolic connection to the heavens. Okay, but what are the chances of all these people coming up with the same idea at the same time? Okay, calm down. Ancient aliens. Yeah, that's possible. But as it turns out, ancient people did talk to each other via trade, migration, and cultural exchange. Ideas like pyramids didn't need to come from a secret one-world civilization. They just came from smart, curious humans scattered across the globe, all looking up at the stars and wondering how to get closer. In fact, recent archaeological discoveries have revealed massive ancient cities deep in the jungle that were completely swallowed by nature. In Guatemala, scientists uncovered a lost Maya city with its own pyramid structures. In Mexico, an entire metropolis was found buried beneath forested hills. So yes, humanity can forget an entire city. Take another look at El Cono from the air, and you might start believing it too. Its slopes are smooth. Its symmetry is uncanny. From above, it resembles a colossal step pyramid or ziggurat, cloaked in jungle vines and secrecy. And if someone told you it was the moss-covered remnant of an ancient civilization, you might just nod and say, "Yeah, I see it." Of course, no one's proven anything yet, but the mystery is delicious, like a myth waiting to be cracked open. At the same time, for people who live nearby, El Cono isn't just a geological curiosity, it's sacred. In Andean cosmology, mountains like El Cono are known as apus, spiritual guardians of the land. These aren't just rocks, they're living beings, protectors, deities. Think Tifiti from Moana, but South American and a little more mysterious. The indigenous tribes in the region still pay their respects to this mountain, treating it not as a tourist attraction, but as a sacred ancestor. And while everyone's busy debating whether El Cono is a mountain or a pyramid, nature's just vibing. The area surrounding El Cono is now part of Sierra del Divisor National Park, created in 2015 to protect one of the richest ecosystems in the Amazon. We're talking about rare plants, hundreds of bird species, many types of monkeys, and endangered animals like jaguars, giant armadillos, and even tapirs, the jungle's adorable pig-elephant hybrid. And yes, there are caves, springs, and even undiscovered ruins hidden deep in the forest around El Cono. So, what is El Cono really? Some geologists think it's likely a volcanic cone based on its shape. That's the official word from UNESCO anyway. Others argue it's a rare example of erosional geomorphology, a fancy way of saying wind, water, and time teamed up to carve a perfect mountain out of the landscape. Like geological origami, shaped by millions of years of natural forces. But the truth is, we don't know. Not for sure. Not yet. Until someone launches a respectful science-based expedition with drones, ground-penetrating radar, and a green light from the local communities, El Cono will keep its secrets. And maybe that's the best part. Sometimes it's mysteries that make the world feel truly magical. Now, let's jump onto a metaphorical plane and head to the Philippines, where the mystery continues and gets a little sweeter. Spread across more than 20 square miles, there are between 1,200 and 1,700, or even more, perfectly shaped hills that look like chocolate kisses. Like seriously. In the dry season, the grass turns brown, and suddenly, it's like someone dropped hundreds of Hershey kisses all over the landscape. Sweet, right? These are the Chocolate Hills, duh. And they're some of the Philippines' most iconic natural wonders. From afar, they look almost too symmetrical, like some alien landscaper came down with a measuring tape and a sense of humor. But how did they get here? Well, according to scientists, the Chocolate Hills are a rare type of karst formation, a term used to describe landscapes formed when slightly acidic rainwater dissolves soft rock like limestone. In this case, the hills were once coral reefs and marine limestone that were pushed above sea level by tectonic forces. Over time, the exposed rocks got eroded by wind, rain, and underwater rivers, leaving behind this stunning army of symmetrical mounds. It's a geological marvel millions of years in the making. But science isn't the only explanation in town. Local legends are more fun. One story says the hills were formed when two giants got into a rock-throwing fight, launching boulders at each other until they collapsed in exhaustion, leaving the landscape littered with mounds, just like that one scene from the Hobbit movie. Another tale speaks of a heartbroken giant whose tears turned into earth, forming the hills as a tribute to his lost love. Oh. Today, the Chocolate Hills are a National Geological Monument and a major tourist attraction in the Philippines. They're also being considered for UNESCO World Heritage status, because, really, where else can you find such a naturally satisfying mix of geology and dessert? If you ever want to visit, it's pretty easy. Fly into Boho Palango International Airport or take a ferry from Cebu, and then head to the towns of Carmen, Batuan, or Sambanga. There are designated viewing decks, eco-parks, and even ATV tours that will let you explore the hills up close. So, whether you're chasing lost pyramids in the jungle or climbing a mountain that turns into chocolate in the summer, the planet still has places that surprise and delight. And that's the real treasure. Sometimes, nature's weirdest, most beautiful shapes aren't hiding aliens or ancient tech. They're just proof that Earth has a wild imagination. Well, here you are, on a week-long trek through the Himalayas. You're exhausted. The cold is cutting through to your bones, and suddenly, you stumble upon a human skeleton near a lake. You look around, and there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of bones scattered across the ground. Well, guess what? This really happened in 1942 with an Indian forest official. Since this chilling discovery, researchers have been trying to figure out how so many people lost their lives in such a remote, isolated spot. So, what happened up there? We're talking about Rupkund, a lake sitting at over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas. But it's not just known by that name. People also call it Mystery Lake, or even more bizarrely, the Skeleton Lake. This place is remote, I mean really remote. It's not just because it's insanely high up, but also because it's surrounded by snow-covered mountains. Now, if you're planning to go there, make sure you have some solid hiking shoes. It's a week-long trek covering more than 30 miles of tough, rugged terrain. Along the way, you'll pass through all kinds of challenging landscapes: moss-covered oak forests, misty fields with an eerie vibe, and up at the top, snow. The highest point of the trek is a knife-edge ridge called Junargali. Just below that lies Rupkund. The closer you get to the lake, the darker the atmosphere feels. And on the ground, you can find human skeletons scattered around, belonging to more than 300 people. Along with them, there were things like wooden artifacts, leather slippers, and rings. Okay, so something really macabre happened here. But what? Well, we have three main theories. Theory number 1, the local legend. According to this story, a long time ago, a king named Raja Justival went on a pilgrimage deep into the Himalayas to reach a sacred mountain temple. He brought his pregnant queen, Rani Balumpa, along with a group of servants, dancers, and others. While they were up in the mountains, a massive hailstorm hit, or as the legend goes, an angry deity started hurling iron balls from the sky. Either way, the storm was brutal, and they had nowhere to take shelter. In the end, they all lost their lives near the lake. Theory number 2, an escape route. Some say the remains belong to Indian soldiers who tried to invade a foreign territory back in 1841, but they were defeated. Over 70 of them were forced to make their way back home through the Himalayas, and they met a tragic end along the way. Theory number 3, a mass grave. This theory suggests that some kind of widespread health issue hit the group. They were all buried there, in isolation, to prevent the disease from spreading. In this case, Rupkund Lake and its surroundings would basically be a cold, remote cemetery. Now, do you know what all these theories have in common? They all assume that the skeletons belong to a single group of people who died in one catastrophic event. But then science came along and things got way creepier. In 2019, 28 scientists from institutions in the US, India, and Germany teamed up for 5 years to figure out what the heck happened up there. They studied the remains of 38 individuals, 23 men and 15 women. And right there, we can already toss out theory number 2. That's important because if these people had been soldiers on a military mission, you would expect most, if not all of them, to be men. Armies in the past were almost entirely male. But here, there were just too many women for that to make sense. And on top of that, no signs of combat or military gear were found at all. After a genetic analysis, researchers noticed that the individuals weren't part of the same family, at least not by blood, like third-degree relatives or closer. And most importantly, they were mostly healthy. These two facts help rule out theory number 3. It probably wasn't some kind of highly contagious health problem. But the most shocking part is that these skeletons didn't belong to just one single group. They actually came from 3 distinct groups. The first group had ancestry that falls within the range of present-day South Asians, basically from the regions that are now India, Pakistan, and Nepal. The second group had ancestry typical of Eastern Mediterranean, just like people from today's Greece, or more specifically from Crete. And they also identified one individual with Southeast Asian-related ancestry. The dating also shows that these remains weren't deposited at the same time. In other words, groups 1 and 2 didn't live during the same period. Their deaths were actually spread out over as much as 1,000 years. Oh great, now theory number 1 is out the window too. After all, the studies can confirm that these people passed away in at least 2 separate tragic events. According to the researchers, there is a possible clue about where at least some of the people with South Asian ancestry might have come from, or why they were even up there in the first place. Rapkund Lake isn't part of any major trade route or anything like that, but it is along the path of a pilgrimage called the Nanda Devi Raj Jat. It still happens today, once every 12 years, where people hike through the mountains for worship and celebration. Now, the written records of this pilgrimage only show up around the late 1800s, but there are inscriptions in nearby temples that go way back, like to the 8th or 10th century. So, it's possible the tradition started much earlier, and maybe some of these people passed away during one of those early pilgrimages, due to a heavy storm or some other natural disaster. Okay, but how do we explain the group that came from Greece? Well, that's definitely more puzzling. First, because there aren't any historical records or evidence to explain who these people were or what they were doing in the far reaches of the Himalayas, so it's hard to know where to start. The study suggests that they could have been a group of unrelated men and women born in the Eastern Mediterranean region around the time the Ottoman Empire controlled that area. The evidence suggests that they had a diet mostly based on land-based foods, not the seafood you would expect from people living near the coast. So they might have lived inland and somehow ended up in the Himalayas, possibly traveling for reasons that researchers can't fully explain yet. The best guess is that they were also participating in a pilgrimage, but honestly, it seems pretty unlikely that people from Europe would have traveled all the way to Rupkund just to do that. And let's assume they did. What exactly happened to them? I mean, how did they all pass away in the same exact spot? Well, the researchers can't say for sure, but people online love to speculate. You think? Some suggest that they fell from the Junagarli Ridge, or since they were at such a high altitude, maybe they passed away due to acute mountain sickness. Up there, the oxygen levels are much lower, which can lead to things like headaches, vomiting, and dizziness. The problem is, it can escalate quickly, and if it affects your lungs and brain, it can become life-threatening. So yeah, it could have happened. But it's still strange to think it happened to so many people all at once. We definitely still need a lot more answers when it comes to Rupkund. But one of the obstacles researchers face is that the site remains highly disturbed and unpreserved. Over the years, trekkers have moved around the skeletons, or worse, some have even taken them home as macabre souvenirs. But the more we mess with those remains, the harder it becomes to find an accurate answer in the future, no matter how much science advances. So, for now, the Mystery Lake will remain exactly that, a big mystery. Stone Age people were grunting cavemen with spears. True or false? Absolutely false. They were gathering around and forming real culture as far as we've discovered. In Turkey, scientists uncovered a 12,000-year-old mystery that's revising history. It's a sophisticated cosmic calendar made out of giant stone temples that may actually be a warning from the stars. We're talking about Göbekli Tepe. This prehistorical site predates even Stonehenge, our classical stone ring circle, by 6,000 years. And it upends why we think Stone Age civilizations emerged and thrived. Here's how this discovery could change our collective history. Around 10,850 BCE, a massive comet, or better yet, a bunch of comet fragments, smashed into Earth. The skies darkened, the temperature dropped, big animals vanished, and it kicked off a mini ice age that lasted over 1,200 years. What's now a place called Göbekli Tepe was home to a group of humans who survived this entire chaotic event. After it happened, they started paying close attention to the sky. As a way of trying to control time a little bit more, they tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and comets. This in turn led them to build a huge lunisolar calendar, the first one in the world. Now, if you were to tour around this classic Stone Age monument, you'd see that not all the stone pillars are blank. Some of them have carvings, like this main one with a bunch of V's on it. Turns out there are 365 V's, which scientists believe represent the days of the solar year. One of them, a V hanging on a bird's neck, is thought to mark a solar eclipse. Other pillars have dangerous animals carved on them, like foxes, lions, scorpions, vultures, twisting and crawling up the sides. Unlike typical Stone Age carvings, these weren't of edible animals like deer or sheep. One of the theories is that these drawings were symbolic. Some archaeologists believe they reflect the fears and chaos this civilization had lived through, a kind of collective attempt to make sense of a terrifying and unpredictable world. Archaeologist Danielle Stordour has highlighted the images of vultures, saying they represent the people who passed away. In some ancient cultures, vultures were believed to carry the souls of the deceased into another realm. She's seen similar symbols in ancient sites nearby. To understand why this all makes sense, we need to dig deeper into the real purpose of this site. Göbekli Tepe was discovered in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who realized that the hill in southeastern Turkey wasn't just another Neolithic mound. Underneath it, his team uncovered massive stone circles supported by pillars weighing up to 20 tons. Radiocarbon dating puts the site at around 12,000 years old, making it the oldest known ceremonial structure ever built. I mean, it predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. This discovery shocked the archaeological world. At the end of the Ice Age, humans were supposed to be nomadic, surviving off wild plants and animals, not building sacred complexes with symbolic art, and giving birth to what we now classify as civilization. We usually think civilization starts with farming, then villages, then crops. But this site suggests something more surprising. Early humans may have come together not to grow food, but to worship. Schmidt found no signs of homes, hearths, or permanent settlement, just stuff used for rituals and gatherings. This has led researchers to believe that spirituality and communal rituals came first and that farming followed. Because to build something this massive, you'd need hundreds of people working together, which in turn would have sparked the need for food, organization, and social structure. In other words, the temple came first, then the village, then the farm. Now, Göbekli Tepe isn't just stirring debate because it's old. It's because it seems too advanced for its time, and that's where the more controversial theories start to emerge. Some researchers believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't simply primitive hunter-gatherers experimenting with stone tools. They may have been the inheritors of ancient knowledge, remnants of a much older civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. This idea ties into the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a theory that a comet struck Earth around 10,850 years ago, triggering a sudden and catastrophic climate shift. According to this view, the survivors of that event passed down their knowledge through symbolism, architecture, and oral tradition. And Göbekli Tepe could be one of the earliest attempts to preserve that memory. Now, if that's true, then the carvings at this site, especially the animal symbols on the pillars, aren't just decorative. They could be astronomical codes, tracking constellations and celestial events. But one pillar might hold the biggest secret of all. It's called the Vulture Stone, and it's freaking archaeologists out. On it, you'll find a strange combination of figures: a headless man, birds, and a scorpion. To the untrained eye, it might seem random, but some researchers believe these are ancient representations of constellations, like Scorpius among them, and that the headless man symbolizes a mass extinction event. Some even argue that this is the oldest known record of a comet impact, the one that triggered the Younger Dryas. And if you're wondering who this older lost civilization might have been, they are called Atlantis, or more neutrally, Civilization X. Theorists like Graham Hancock suggest that this advanced culture, destroyed in the chaos of the comet impact, passed fragments of its knowledge to survivors around the globe. In that case, Göbekli Tepe wasn't the start of civilization, it was the restart. Now, back to the stones. Pillar 43 may look like a celestial calendar at first, but when archaeologists recreated the sky patterns encoded in its carvings, they found a precise snapshot of the sky dating back over 13,000 years. It appears to show a meteor shower, a flood, and humanity's tragic end, aka the Headless Man. A snake rising from the ground might even symbolize tidal waves or destruction coming from below. But the story doesn't end there. Pillar seems to expand on the same disaster, the one they called the Terror of the Sky. You might see animals fleeing, waves, fire raining down. It paints a vivid picture of the meteor shower. But wait! While Pillars 43 and 56 may encode memories of a past catastrophe, Pillar 18 might be a forecast. That stone zooms in on the Aquarius constellation. If this sounds familiar, maybe it's from the phase Age of Aquarius, which is the age we're living in now. Some enthusiasts believe this may be a warning for us, and may be telling us that a similar meteor shower will hit Earth and thus you and me and us. I mean, chills! But hey, that's the kind of mystery that makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. Today, archaeologists know that Göbekli Tepe was part of a much larger sacred complex, now known as Taş Tepeler. A network of ancient sites across the region, each with its own secrets and structures, but connected by shared patterns and motifs. In 2019, excavations began at this sister site, just 40 miles from Göbekli Tepe, known as Karahan Tepe. And here's the twist. Some researchers believe Karahan Tepe might be even older. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, which appears to have been primarily ceremonial, Karahan Tepe has signs of domestic structures like walls, tools, and perhaps even homes. And that changes everything. Because whether these sites were the work of highly sophisticated hunter-gatherers or survivors carrying the fragments of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, one thing becomes clear. Our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were planning, tracking, and predicting. They were far more capable, curious, and connected to the universe than we ever gave them credit for.
A long time ago, a huge meteorite smashed into the Earth with a horrible destructive power. It was several times bigger than the one that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Luckily, there were no lives it could have taken, or else it would have been a real catastrophe. Now, scientists think it did leave behind a huge footprint, the massive Antarctica impact crater that is bigger than the entire state of New York. The location also has a gravitational Wilkes Land anomaly going on. At first, scientists noticed something weird here when they measured Earth's gravity in that region. A strange gravity hole, or a negative gravity anomaly. Later, with better technology, they found something even weirder. There was a positive gravity anomaly inside that gravity hole, a spot with stronger gravity. This kind of structure, called a mascon, short for mass concentration, often shows up in places where giant space rocks or meteorites have slammed into the planet. When a meteor hits hard enough, it punches through the Earth's crust and shakes the mantle below. It can spring back up and leave behind a super dense plug of material, which causes stronger gravity right in the center of the crater. It's something like a frosty donut, with ice filling the gap and a dense center rising up from underneath. In 2018, scientists used advanced scanning techniques to study and map the Wilkes Land meteorite impact in more detail than ever before. They saw that it wasn't a perfect circle, but more of a U-shape, and the northern part looked like something had broken it apart. It possibly happened when Australia split away from Antarctica about 35 million years ago. Some scientists even think you can still see parts of the crater in southern Australia today. This clue also supports the idea that the giant crater under Antarctica formed before the continents broke apart. There have been different ideas about what created this strange formation. Some said it might be a volcano or an eroded valley, or even a sedimentary basin. That is a place where sediments build up over millions of years. But many scientists now believe the most likely explanation is a massive meteor impact. It was possibly one of the biggest to ever hit Earth. A 2015 study even estimated the age of the crater as its size matches the kind of space rocks that smashed into Earth between 4.1 and 3.8 billion years ago. The Wilkes Land meteorite impact was so powerful because the meteor that caused it could have been up to 30 miles wide. That's 4 to 5 times wider than the Chicxulub meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Even that meteor was enough to cause massive destruction with wildfires, acid rain, tsunamis, and a climate crash that wiped out about 75% of all existing life. So it was lucky in a way that the meteorite that gave us the giant crater under Antarctica visited at a time when there were only microbes and no plants or animals on Earth. It didn't cause mass extinction or leave behind charcoal from ancient fires, but it may have changed the entire planet. Still, scientists haven't put the Wilkes Land anomaly mystery in the solved files. Because the crater is buried deep under Antarctica's thick ice sheet, it's hard to study up close. Scientists say we can't rule out the other ideas just yet, but if the meteor theory is right, then the Wilkes Land crater could be the largest known impact crater on Earth. So far, this title belongs to another contestant, the Vredefort crater in South Africa. Right now, the crater is around 99 miles wide, which is huge. But it's not as wide as the Chicxulub crater in Mexico, which is about 112 miles wide. But the Vredefort crater used to be way bigger, around 155 to 174 miles wide, before time and erosion wore it down. That means even though the Chicxulub impact was striking, the Vredefort impact was likely even more powerful, the biggest one we know of that hit Earth. According to the latest study, that asteroid was 12.4 to 15.5 miles wide and might have hit Earth at a speed of 45,000 to 56,000 miles per hour. It's important for science because knowing the real size of this impact helps us build better models to understand Earth's geology and how giant impacts shape planets, even beyond Earth. Measuring ancient craters is really tricky. Over 2 billion years, erosion wears away the edges and newer rocks form over the crater. That's what happened to Vredefort. Now, only small bits of the original crater rim are visible, and the rest is hidden under newer rock. To figure out its true size, scientists studied minerals like quartz and zircon found around the crater. These minerals still have fractures and shock patterns that show us how powerful the blast was. Wilkes Land anomaly isn't the only case on our planet where gravity is acting weirdly. For over 40 years, scientists were trying to solve a strange mystery in Canada. Parts of the country, especially around Hudson Bay, seem to have less gravity than the rest of the world. That means if you stepped on a scale there, you'd weigh just a tiny bit less than usual. Researchers first discovered this weird difference in the 1960s when they were mapping Earth's gravity. Gravity is linked to mass. The more mass there is, the stronger the gravity. And since Earth isn't shaped perfectly like a ball but is slightly squashed at the poles and bulges at the equator, it makes sense that its mass isn't spread out evenly. So, the first out of the two main theories to explain the Hudson Bay mystery has to do with magma. Yes, that super hot, gooey rock deep under our planet's surface. Magma constantly churns like boiling soup in a process called convection. As this magma moves, it can drag parts of Earth's crust down with it. That makes the area lighter, which lowers the gravity. The second area has to do with the Florentine ice sheet, a massive glacier that covered much of Canada during the last ice age. This ice was up to 2.3 miles thick in some parts of Hudson's Bay. That's like stacking 10 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. Because it was so heavy, the ice pressed the land down like a thumb on a sponge. Even though the ice melted away about 10,000 years ago, the land underneath is still slowly bouncing back, kind of like a memory foam mattress after you get up. This slow rise is called glacial rebound, and it's happening at less than half an inch per year. Until the land fully bounces back, which could take 5,000 more years, it will continue to have less mass, and that means less gravity. Both of these theories are right. To figure this out, scientists used super advanced satellites, which floated around 300 miles above Earth for several years. These satellites flew in pairs and detected how far apart they were pulled as they passed over areas like Hudson Bay to measure tiny changes in gravity. When the front satellite passed over a low-gravity area, it drifted just slightly, and that change was recorded. Thanks to this research, scientists created detailed maps showing what Hudson Bay looked like during the last ice age. They discovered two huge bulges on the west and east sides, where the ice was thickest. And those spots have the weakest gravity today. The effects of this are still visible, and while sea levels are rising in most parts of the world, the land around Hudson Bay is rising so fast that sea levels there are actually dropping. Solving mysteries like this or the Antarctica impact crater anomaly gives scientists amazing insights into the past of our planet. And by understanding how past changes in temperature and geology affected Earth, scientists can predict how today's human activity can impact our future. Let's face it, most ancient tombs have been looted at least once. No matter how scary the rumors could have been, most mummies were open too. But one. This is the Bashiri mummy, and it puzzles everyone so much that nobody dares to see what's inside. Meet Howard, but you must know him already if you're into Egyptian history. He's primarily famous for discovering King Tut's tomb back in 1922. But few people know that before this revolutionary discovery, he had probably found another mummy. It happened in 1919, and it goes by several names, either the Bashiri mummy or the Mummy of Pacheri, or the Untouchable One. Some reports say that Howard stumbled upon the Bashiri mummy in Luxor's Valley of the Kings, just where he would later find Tut's tomb. Despite this find, not much is known about this particular mummy. The reason why it's still unharmed in any way is not because of some superstitions, but because nobody is sure that they can undo what they do if something goes wrong. The mummy is so intricately wrapped that researchers never unfurled it for fear of irreversible damage. The golden rule of anyone who works with antiquities: if you're not sure you can't make it better or preserve it unchanged, do not touch it. History knows many examples of ancient relics ruined beyond repair, say Ecce Homo, or smiling statue restoration. The delicate fabric that covers the mummy's face has this cool design that kind of looks like a pyramid. The researchers are not 100% sure, but this might be the only one of its kind with that embalming style. But without knowing the ancient technique, it's next to impossible not to ruin the mummy while unwrapping and wrapping it back. Back in the day, people, both experts and looters, would unwrap mummies for all sorts of reasons, mostly to study them. Luckily, these days, we have advanced tech that lets us check out what's inside a sarcophagus without having to unwrap anything. After taking a closer look at the Bashiri mummy, researchers figured out that it belonged to a man who was around 5.5 feet tall and lived during the Ptolemaic era, which makes this mummy roughly 2,300 years old. The Egypt Museum shared that the X-ray scan also uncovered an inscription of the guy's name, but it's a bit tricky to tell if it says Pacheri or Nenu, adding to the intrigue. The museum also pointed out that the fancy casing the mummy is in features all sorts of decorated scenes. You can see the mummy lying on a bed, flanked by deities Isis and Nephthys, along with the 4 sons of Horus. Plus, there are 2 images of the funerary god Anubis at the feet of the casing. By the way, Bashiri mummy is not the only one that has remained untouched. This is Issa Temkebde, and Gaston Maspero, a French archaeologist, made the decision to leave her mummy untouched, wanting to keep her resting peacefully since she was in such amazing shape. He did mention, though, that her tomb had been raided long ago. Thanks to some X-ray work, we learned more about the mummy. The scans revealed a few artifacts still wrapped up with the wife of a high priest, including amulets around her neck, right arm, and forehead. The X-rays also showed she had some dental issues and arthritis in her knees. While she passed away as an older woman, it's tough to pinpoint her exact age. However, various sources from her son's reign indicate that she was held in high regard in the kingdom. Isatemkebd served as the sister wife of Penejim II. You got me right, they were related by blood and were siblings, but back then it was pretty common to get married this way to preserve the purity of the bloodline. Say that to Habsburg, duh. Their chase for purity only led to inbreeding and the notorious Habsburg's jaw. Right, I guess we should not judge ancient Egyptian rules and morals, but what we can say for sure is that both Bashiri and Isatemkebd were incredibly lucky to stay untouched. The odds were not in King Tut's favor, though. The researchers' work hit him hard. The tomb itself was discovered in 1922, but it wasn't until 1925 that the nested coffins were opened during an excavation. The outer coffin, held together with silver pins, opened up to show another coffin shaped like a mummy, decorated with colorful glass and flower garlands. There were worries about the king's mummy because it had been exposed to moisture. The middle coffin was pretty heavy and didn't have any handles, so they had to be super careful taking it out. Inside the innermost coffin, which was solid gold and wrapped in a red cloth, they found the royal mummy, and this all went down on October 28, 1925. Tutankhamun's mummy, measuring about 6.07 feet, fit snugly into the innermost coffin, which was 6.17 feet long. You can already tell there was a problem, right? Imagine how hard it is to extract something as fragile as an ancient dried-up mummy, especially when there's not much room for maneuver. Plus, the mummy looked sus. It was pitch black. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist of the expedition, estimated that around 2 buckets worth of oils had been poured over the mummy. But care had been taken to avoid the mask and feet. It was made to preserve him better. The body was positioned at a slight angle in the coffin, and there was a noticeable difference in the amount of dark oils on the right and left sides, indicating that the coffin might have tilted while being lowered into the sarcophagus. This oil created moisture inside the coffins, and over time, it reacted chemically, which Carter described as a sort of slow, spontaneous combustion, leading to the carbonization of the linen wrappings. Unfortunately, the combination of heat and moisture took a toll on the mummy's trappings as well. The crooked flail fell apart, the resin scarab cracked, and the threads holding the hands and mummy's bands started to decay, making everything quite fragile. Plus, the oils hardened over the years, effectively gluing the mummy and mask to the coffin's bottom. To try and separate the mummy from the inner and middle coffins, they were placed in the sun for several hours, reaching temperatures of 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite this effort, the mummy remained stuck, so the initial examination had to be done right where it was. The first part of Tutankhamun's mummy the researchers checked out was his lower legs and feet, meaning they started the examination from the bottom up. As they peeled back the bandages, they uncovered the first of many treasures wrapped up with the king. They took their time to carefully document and photograph everything they found. The inner layers of bandages were in pretty bad shape, mostly turning to dust, making it tough to figure out how everything was originally wrapped. Still, the overall methods matched what was seen in other nobles' mummies from that time. Lots of folded linen pads were used to shape the torso and thighs. The outer and inner bandages were made from fine linen, while the middle layers were coarser. They had some intricate bandaging around the shoulders and chest with a similar style around the groin. Each limb, along with fingers and toes, which were fitted with gold caps, was wrapped separately. Tutankhamun even wore gold foil sandals on his feet. They hoped to separate the mummy from the coffin by removing the outer bandages, but the resins had stuck the body to the coffin. So, the researchers ended up chiseling it out. To do this, they had to cut the torso in half at the hips and disarticulate the arms to continue unwrapping. Each part was treated with hot paraffin wax for stability, and later the hands and feet were reattached with resin. Finally, they used hot knives to detach the head from the mask. To check the teeth, it was decided to make an incision around the jaw and neck, which was later fixed with resin. So technically, the scientists did all they could to preserve the mummy, but still, in a way, it ended up being damaged beyond repair. What do you think? Should they have left it in the coffin? Or did they do the right thing? Let us know in the comments. In 1936, British Egyptologist Walter Bryan Emery found a small object in the desert that made people debate whether it was an elaborate stone model of a flying saucer or even a hyperdrive from a spaceship that belonged to some advanced civilization that visited the Earth. Emery spent years excavating sites along the Nile River Valley, especially in the huge ancient necropolis of Saqqara. He found countless treasures from ancient Egypt, and the most bizarre one was definitely from the tomb of a high official, Sabu. Historians don't know exactly who he was for sure. Some sources say he was a king's son. His burial at Saqqara means he was an important figure in the royal court. There are no records from this early period he lived in, so Sabu's role and fate are still a mystery. Inside his tomb, scientists found 7 funerary chambers, each filled with traditional grave goods: animal bones, flint tools, pottery, ivory objects, and stone bowls. And then there was a strange, broken artifact that became famous as the Disc of Sabu. It resembles a shallow, round-bottomed bowl, but with 3 delicately carved, curved lobes spaced roughly 120 degrees apart around its perimeter. These lobes are separated by 3 holes, and at the center, there's a thin tube. The material used to build the disc is meta-siltstone, or schist. This type of rock is fragile, highly porous, and super difficult to carve. It flakes easily and crumbles under pressure. So how they made the disc out of it with rather simple stone and copper tools from 3000 BCE is still a mystery. The next big question is why they decided to bury Sabu with it. Perhaps if we knew its true purpose, it would make more sense. When it was first discovered, archaeologists thought it was nothing more than a vase, an incense burner, or a ceremonial decoration. But those who took a closer look from the point of view of an engineer decided it could actually be a component of a larger mechanism. An amateur historian made an exact copy of the artifact with a 3D printer, and it turned out that the disc of Sabu was an ancient impeller, a crucial part of a centrifugal pump. When they put it in a housing and span at high speeds using the small central shaft, the disc was able to displace water. When it was tested without a housing, the disc created a powerful vortex. It became clear that the curved lobes and slightly concave shape of the disc weren't random. It was probably all engineered to move water with remarkable efficiency, like a powerful pump mechanism. Ancient Egypt's entire civilization depended on irrigation. Later dynasties perfected basin irrigation and managed to control the rise and fall of the Nile to take the most from agriculture. So, the engineers of the first dynasty may have been experimenting with advanced irrigation techniques thousands of years earlier than scientists previously thought. But then again, some people have doubts schist is strong enough to be used for a pumping mechanism. They suggest that artisans from Egypt's first dynasty were trying to recreate an even older object, using whatever tools and materials they had. It could be a stone replica of something originally made from metal, possibly belonging to a civilization far older and more advanced than ancient Egypt itself. One Swiss author takes this idea even further and proposes that the disc is a copy of a component from an extraterrestrial spaceship's hyperdrive, or stone model of a flying saucer. One French researcher believes the disc of Sabu was part of a secret massive factory system to manufacture sodium carbonate inside pyramids. Some people suggest that the disc may have been a primitive tool for weaving ropes. The lobes held strands of silk or fiber that were twisted into twine when it was spun. Or it may have been a gigantic lamp. Another historical mystery is a map from 1513 that is believed to be the oldest surviving detailed map showing the Americas. The author of the map is a Turkish captain, Piri Reis. He never crossed the ocean himself and put together this map from 20 regional maps. He used an Arab map of India, 4 Portuguese maps showing India and China, and a map of America by Christopher Columbus as he saw it. This last map was lost for many years, so Reis's map gave us an idea of what Columbus must have recorded during his third voyage to the New World. A historian who studied the map suggested that it showed Antarctica in prehistoric times because it strangely resembled Antarctica's true coastline, the way it looked when it was free of ice. But it was later proven that this idea wasn't right. Another idea that rocked the science world was Klerksdorp spheres. They were found in deposits of mineral pyrophyllite in South Africa and looked like tiny ancient cricket balls with lines around the middle. Back in the 1980s, there was a theory that some super advanced pre-flood civilization we know nothing about had made these spheres. One journalist shared stories about how they rotated on their own in a display case. There was also a TV show that invited a psychic who was telling everyone the spheres were pieces of an ancient spaceship. But according to geologists, these spheres are pretty regular spherical objects formed from different minerals than the surrounding rock. The seam-like lines on them are just imprints from the host rock's layers building up over time. The Klerksdorp spheres come in different shapes, from flattened spheres to distinct discs. As for that episode when one of these spheres spun on its own, the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum cleared that up too. He said that when he put one sphere on its glass shelf when the journalist came to visit, the sphere rotated a bit because it's round. There are some gold mining activities going on nearby, so the land where the museum stands often experiences earth tremors. In a remote part of China, there are some bizarre pipe-like formations known as the Beigon Pipes. A local explorer found them back in 1996 protruding from Mount Beigon and along the shores of Tosan Lake nearby. Some people thought they were the work of ancient guests from other planets. When scientists tested samples of the pipe material, they found out that they contained mostly common minerals, but there was a mysterious 8% of unknown stuff. Some extra tests showed that these pipes had been there before humans. Chinese geologists later visited the site and suggested that these pipes were formed naturally over time. It was probably fossilized tree roots from the area's super green past. It's still a real mystery with no clear-cut answer. While digging a trench along a river in Romania, workers found a wedge, which is now famous as the aluminum wedge of Ajud, or the object of Ajud. Right next to it, there were some mastodon bones. Those distant relatives of elephants lived 11,000 years ago. So some people concluded the wedge is of the same age. The cool part is that it's made of aluminum, but this metal wasn't discovered until the 1800s. This material requires serious heat to produce. The wedge is said to be covered in a thick layer of oxide that's been sitting there for hundreds of years. Some folks believe this wedge must have crash-landed here on a spacecraft from some other planet. Some scientists think it's all a hoax, and others suppose it might be a human-made object with an unknown purpose.
Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John, Jack's great-great-great-great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed, did they? Well, actually, they existed, and some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge, which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago, just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now, it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy, and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities. Well, here you are. You're getting into your submarine, feeling a bit anxious. You're going to descend hundreds of feet underwater to explore the ocean floor. So many things can go wrong. Technical issues, insane water pressure, dangerous marine monsters, mysterious eerie sounds. Wait, what? Eerie sounds so deep underwater? Yep, a strange humming noise is coming from the ocean depths. What makes it even creepier is that it only appears during dusk and dawn. This noise might act as a dinner bell, since it's likely to have a connection to massive groups of sea creatures moving up and down through the water to feed. But so far, it's just a theory. Using highly sensitive underwater microphones, researchers recorded a mysterious low-frequency hum at depths of 660 to 3,300 feet. The sound wasn't very loud, just 3 to 6 decibels above the usual ocean background noise. For comparison, when someone is whispering in a quiet library, the sound reaches 30 decibels. The underwater noise also had a puzzling or humming quality. The weirdest thing? Despite their efforts, the researchers couldn't pinpoint a single species responsible for the sound. The noise originates in a region known as the twilight zone of the ocean. This region is dark and doesn't have many nutrients, with no sunlight for photosynthesis. Life here relies on organic debris falling from above, such as deceased organisms or waste material. At the same time, while it may sound barren, the twilight zone is far from empty. A 2015 study estimated that up to 90% of the world's fish could live in this zone, including many undiscovered species. Now, back to the mysterious noise. The researchers believe the sound may be linked to the vertical migration of small marine creatures like fish, shrimp, and squid. These animals move upward toward the surface at sunset to feed on plankton and nutrients, using darkness to avoid predators. At sunrise, they return to the depths to hide. This migration, which is one of the largest animal movements on Earth, involves billions of organisms and occurs daily. Scientists suspect that the strange hum might occur during this migration, as a way for the creatures to communicate or coordinate their movements. It might also serve as a signal to indicate when it's safe for a group to go to the surface and feed. If some animals indeed use the hum to communicate, it could help us understand deep-sea life better. The Twilight Zone has always been considered a quiet environment, but such a discovery hints at complex social behaviors and interactions among its inhabitants. But it's not only the ocean that produces bizarre sounds. Earth is humming non-stop too. Unfortunately, you can't hear this soundtrack. This hum isn't from earthquakes. It's produced by subtle ongoing vibrations in the planet's crust. They're too faint for us to feel and can only be detectable with special equipment. Scientists have long known about this phenomenon called free oscillation and have recorded this persistent hum. Earthquakes are the most noticeable ground movements. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, Earth experiences about 500,000 earthquakes every year. Of those, only 100,000 are strong enough to be felt, and around 100 cause noticeable damage. But in the quieter moments between earthquakes, the planet is still constantly vibrating with smaller, unnoticeable movements. Unlike the sudden jolts of earthquakes, this hum is steady and uniform, and it's a byproduct of microseismic activity. Seismometers, tools used to record ground vibrations, can detect this sound anywhere on land. For years, researchers have been debating the origins of this hum. Some thought it came from ocean waves reaching deep into the seafloor. Others believed it was caused by colliding waves on the ocean's surface. By 2015, scientists had confirmed that both factors contributed to Earth's constant vibration. And although this hum has been recorded on land, now we also have much clearer, more detailed underwater recordings. To study the hum, researchers used spherical seismometers on the seafloor in the Indian Ocean near an island east of Madagascar. Between September 2012 and November 2013, they placed 57 freefall seismometers across a 772 square mile area. These devices are designed to sink into the ocean floor and record even the faintest vibrations. Over the course of the 11-month study, the team filtered out noise from ocean waves and seafloor currents. They got clear, consistent signals of Earth's hum, with peaks at frequencies between 2.9 and 4.5 MHz, far below the range of human hearing, which starts at 20 Hz. The discovery of Earth's hum from the ocean floor is more than just a scientific curiosity. It gives researchers a new way to study how energy moves through the planet's crust and mantle. In any case, the world around us is filled with weird sounds that sometimes remain unexplained. One of the most intriguing examples is the bloop, an incredibly loud underwater sound recorded in 1997 by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The sound lasted about a minute and began as a low rumble, which then increased in frequency. It was so loud that underwater microphones detected it across an astonishing 3,000 miles. Initially, some experts thought it was the call of a massive unknown sea creature. However, NOAA later determined that the source likely had been the calving of icebergs, when giant pieces of Antarctic glaciers had been breaking off and crashing into the sea. The sound, known as Julia, a strange cooing noise, could have been produced by an iceberg scraping along the ocean floor. Another sound, dubbed train, due to its resemblance to the sound of train wheels on a track, likely originated in Antarctica's Ross Sea. Then there is upsweep, a recurring seasonal scratchy noise detected in the Pacific Ocean since 1991. Despite years of research, its exact cause remains unclear. The underwater world also has bizarre sounds that can be described as choirs of fish. Scientists studying marine life off the coast of Port Hedland in Western Australia discovered that many fish species sing in synchronized choruses at dawn and dusk, much like birds. Over 18 months, researchers recorded tons of sounds, including foghorn-like calls from black jewelfish and rhythmic ba-ba-ba sounds from batfish. These fish songs, which often involve repetitive calls that overlap in large groups, are especially important for breeding, feeding, and territorial behavior. Deeper in the ocean, NOAA researchers also explored the sounds of the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench. They used a titanium-encased microphone that managed to survive the crushing pressure over 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. Over 23 days, the recorder captured loads of noises, from the haunting songs of whales to the rumble of distant earthquakes. Now, we've already figured out that the ocean is filled with strange sounds, but you can also hear weird noises above ground. One of the most puzzling is the hum, a low-pitched noise reported by people in specific areas, such as Taos, New Mexico, or Bristol, England. The sound is often described as a faint engine-like drone, and its source remains a mystery. Some researchers think it might be a psychological phenomenon, where people focus on subtle background sounds they might otherwise ignore. In any case, no definitive answer has been found yet. Geological formations can sing too. Utah's Rainbow Bridge, a massive 300-foot-high sandstone arch, vibrates like a guitar string when exposed to sounds, distant earthquakes, or waves near Lake Powell. Scientists have studied its frequencies to understand how such vibrations could affect the bridge's stability over time. Interestingly, visitors to the Rainbow Bridge have reported hearing faint humming sounds too. The skies also have their own eerie noises. For centuries, people in polar regions have described faint sizzling, popping, and cracking sounds, accompanying auroras. A Finnish researcher made the first known recordings of these sounds and traced their origin to electrical discharges in the lower atmosphere, about 230 feet above the ground. These charges, caused by magnetic storms fueling auroras, produce faint sounds during calm and clear nights. Other natural phenomena, such as icebergs grinding against the seafloor or volcanic activity on the ocean floor, produce groans, rumbles, and crackling sounds that scientists study to learn about glacial movements and underwater geological activity. I myself produce many unusual sounds and rumbles, but, that's a subject for another video, or my next annual review.
Scientists found a new statue on Easter Island, inside the crater of an old volcano. They were sure they already cataloged all the moai. That's what they call those famous stone giants. But this discovery changes what we know about them. First of all, the moai were rarely alone, so we may hear about more of them in the same area. Second, it's the first moai found at the bottom of a lake. Scientists were working on a project to restore the marshland in the volcano's crater when they stumbled upon the statue. The lake that was here began to dry up in 2018. For at least 200 or 300 years, it was almost 10 feet deep, so it would be impossible for humans to build or put a statue on the bottom. Scientists think the moai are over 500 years old. It's possible that the Rapa Nui people who built them probably brought the statue here when the lake was dry in the past. The new find turned out to be slightly over 5 feet tall, which is smaller than the other statues on the island. It's a full-bodied one with recognizable features. Researchers also plan to do radiocarbon dating to find out the exact age of the statue. They don't plan to remove it from where it was found because the oldest members of the Rapa Nui community want it to stay where it is. Moai statues kept scientists puzzled for centuries. They knew that they were built as a dedication to the island's chiefs, but no one could figure out why they chose these various locations for the statues. Most of them were found along the coast of the island. Researchers from Binghamton University in New York decided to study the locations more closely and learned that it had to do with water. Easter Island has porous volcanic soil that absorbs rain easily, so there aren't enough streams or rivers and too little fresh water. Hundreds of years ago, the island's people relied on groundwater discharge to get drinking water. The water stored deep underground in rock or soil layers, called aquifers, reach a point where it flows up to the surface. When this underground water emerges near the coast, it mixes with the salty seawater, but the salt level remains low enough that the water is safe to drink. The islanders used to collect this water directly from the spots where it flowed out. And it looks like that's why they built the moai along the coast, right near their most important water source. The main bodies of most of the statues were made of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. This material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages. It looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their sculptors detached them from the rock, moved them downslope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. When it was done, it was time to move the statue to its platform. And we're talking about moving statues that weighed around half as much as a single-story, unfurnished house without a car or any modern equipment for 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original transportation method. Scientists tried to recreate it and pulled moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone would have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This sounds legit, because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researchers Catherine Rutledge found an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were there exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the way for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues reached their final destinations because they were all set on hidden platforms. The road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. Scientists used to believe that the Rapa Nui people made Easter Island unlivable and ruined their own civilization. But a new study that used remote sensing data and machine learning says that the island's population didn't grow too big and collapse. Instead, the islanders figured out how to live in this challenging place and kept their population small and steady for hundreds of years. Researchers found amazing rock gardens as proof for this new theory. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is one of the most remote places on Earth where people live. It's surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. Central Chile is 2,200 miles to the east of it, and French Polynesia is 2,600 miles to the west. The island, which is 63 square miles in size, is made entirely of volcanic rock. But the volcano stopped erupting a long time ago, So, Rapa Nui's soil has lost most of the useful nutrients that lava once brought here. It's also drier than tropical islands, and its deep waters made fishing much harder for the settlers, as there's no shallow lagoons or reefs to fish in. So, the islanders came up with a smart farming method called rock gardening to survive here. They spread rocks of different sizes over the soil and planted crops like sweet potatoes and taro between the rocks. The rocks protected the plants from harsh winds and salty air and helped regulate the soil's temperature. They also slowly released minerals into the soil, so it became healthier for growing food. Some islanders still use these gardens, although they don't produce a lot of food. People in places like New Zealand, the Canary Islands, and the US Southwest have used similar techniques to grow crops in uneasy environments. While scientists are solving Easter Island mysteries, the island itself is teaching them something new about how the Earth's mantle works. For years, they thought it moved like a slow conveyor belt, carrying tectonic plates along with it. But a new study by geologists from Cuba, Colombia, and the Netherlands is challenging this idea. They used a special method called zircon dating to figure out the island's age. Zircons are tiny crystals that form when magma cools, and they have traces of uranium inside that turns into lead over time. So, the scientists measured this change to tell the age of zircons. And they were shocked when they saw that some zircons were way older than expected, around 165 million years old. The island itself is only 2.5 million years old. The scientists found that these ancient zircons came from deep inside the mantle, under the tectonic plate, by magma from earlier volcanic activity. Easter Island's volcanoes are part of a group called hotspot volcanoes, formed by hot plumes of rock rising from deep within the Earth. Normally, these plumes stay in one spot while the Earth's crust moves above them and creates a chain of islands, like Hawaii. But the discovery of ancient zircons on a younger island shows there's more going on deep underground than we thought. Research showed that 165 million years ago, a giant volcanic plateau existed where Easter Island is now. But 110 million years ago, it sank under Antarctica because of tectonic subduction. Ancient zircon minerals stayed put and didn't travel away with the mantle conveyor belt. So, it looks like the mantle near hotspot plumes doesn't flow as much as scientists used to think. It stays still. This new idea could lead to big changes in how we understand plate tectonics and how the Earth's inside moves over time.
In the UK, there are around 115,000 mailboxes, with some of them placed in questionable locations. Look here, we're on a deserted stretch of Caithness Moorhead, and here, just smack dab in the middle of nowhere, between the quarry and some moorland, stands a solitary mailbox. It was local teacher Chris Aitken who stumbled upon this oddity near Worth Hill, close to John O'Groats. Now, John O'Groats is a tiny village 2.5 miles northeast of Caithness Bay, in the historic county of Caithness, Scotland. The village itself is popular with tourists, but only houses around 300 people on a regular basis, and they have their own mailboxes there. So why would someone need one on a random hill? When Chris shared a photo online, someone chimed in with a theory. A while back, an entrepreneur was selling tiny parcels of land near Campster, claiming buyers became lairds with their little plots. Could this mailbox be related to that? Now, the box, proudly labeled Laird of John O'Groats, features the name Thorsten Sommer and an address in Germany. There's a PIN number on the front, but when Chris opened it, all he found was a website link. The site has pics of Sommer waving a Scottish flag and talking about his love for Scotland, even calling himself the Old Scotsman. Chris tried reaching out through the website for more info, but hasn't heard back. It might be linked to Sommer's reported purchase of a tiny patch of land, but buying Scottish laird titles is often seen as a fraud, giving no real title at all. The area around Worth Hill has had some recent police action too, after a body was found nearby. Ooh, could that somehow be connected to this mysterious mailbox too? Well, enough of the detective stories. Let's dive into some high-end fashion, shall we? So you might have come across that funky image popping up all over the internet, claiming there's a pop-up Prada store in the Texas desert. Well, it's kind of true and kind of not. Yes, there's a shop, sort of. It showcased a whole range of Prada gear worth around $80,000. And guess what? Miuccia Prada herself handpicked the items. But still, you couldn't buy a single thing there. No cashiers, no shop assistants. It was like the place was permanently closed. The twist? It's actually an art installation. Made entirely of biodegradable materials, it was designed to gradually blend back into nature, taking a fun jab at our current consumer culture. But why display goods you can't actually buy? Well, it's a metaphor for the elusive charm of luxury. While it was meant to decay in peace, the hype surrounding it led to a surprising amount of foot traffic and even some chaos. After trying to fend off a few would-be thieves, the artist had to admit defeat. Now it's a hotspot for photos, drawing everyone from tourists to celebrities. Right, you can find a brand purse in the desert, but can you, let's say, find a car somewhere in Welsh caves? Well, the answer is yes, and let me tell you, it's not just one car, but many of them. The Cavern of Lost Souls is a well-known abandoned car cave tucked away in Wales. Once upon a time, it was a slate mine in Ceredigion, where workers pulled out tons of slate and transported it using narrow-gauge horse-drawn tramways. But as the mining industry faded away decades ago, the mine fell into a hush. If you dare go inside, which I personally do not recommend, you'll find two large chambers, but one is particularly noteworthy. The main chamber plunges around 65 feet deep and is mostly underwater, with just a small opening above. Since the mine shut down, locals and the council have taken advantage of that opening, tossing in all sorts of unwanted stuff. You'll find everything from fridges and TVs to even whole cars piled up in one corner. What makes the Cavern of Lost Souls special is the single beam of light that breaks through, casting its glow on the twisted heap of wrecked cars and metal. The water, when hit by that light, glows a stunning turquoise green, creating beautiful reflections of the cars and cavern walls on the still surface. Every now and then, a fragment of slate falls, shattering the quiet and sending ripples across the water. There was yet another weird find in Wales. A shiny 10-foot silver monolith recently popped up on Hay Bluff in Powys, Wales, and is sparking a ton of curiosity. A local builder, Craig Muir, discovered it during his hike, and he described it as looking like it just dropped down from space. It's made of surgical steel, has no markings, and is super well crafted without visible welds. Muir's find is reminiscent of those mysterious monoliths that popped up worldwide in 2020, creating quite a buzz online. Local Richard Haynes suggested it could be some kind of scientific installation, but with national park rules against unauthorized structures, it might not be there for long. With no visible tracks around it, Muir speculated it could have been brought in by a group or even dropped from a helicopter. Now, this isn't the first strange monolith sighting. Similar ones have been spotted in Utah, the Isle of Wight, and even Glastonbury Tor, where one was humorously marked "Not Banksy." However, it could be easily him. The UK is the leading country in terms of the number of Banksy's pieces of art. As of 2023, there were 70 of them. No wonder, as he is reportedly British and was born in Bristol. The Atacama Desert in northern Chile, the driest non-polar desert on Earth, features a bizarre sight at kilometer mark 1309 on the Pan American Highway, a giant cement hand that towers 36 feet above the sand. Looks creepy, right? Well, worry not. It's not some creepy monster trying to grip you and take you to the netherworld. It's not an ancient relic from a lost civilization either. A professional sculptor created this quirky landmark back in 1992. Despite its remoteness, the hand is frequently targeted by graffiti, so local volunteers must clean it up twice a year. And by the way, it's not the only landmark of this kind. The very same sculptor also created a similar hand in Punta del Este, Uruguay, called Man Emerging to Life, and it represents the idea that a giant might be holding South America in a stone grip. Hey, works for me. Now check out this giant stone sphere hidden in the forest of Bosnia's Visoko Valley. What do you think? Is it an ancient relic or a modern art installation? Share your thoughts in the comments. But to be completely frank with you, which I always am, nobody really knows for sure. Experts think this sphere, which measures around 10 feet across, is just a naturally occurring rock formation called a concretion. These iron-rich balls get their reddish color from the high iron content and form when mineral particles stick together over time. While concretions can take on some pretty wild shapes, the exact process of how they form is still a bit of a mystery. Then there's this archaeologist, often called the Bosnian Indiana Jones, who claims it's actually a man-made artifact from over 1,000 years ago. Spherical concretions aren't unique to Bosnia, though. You can find them all over the world, like these boulders in New Zealand, massive round stones that are over 60 million years old. There are also cannonball concretions in North Dakota. And let's not forget about the man-made stone spheres crafted by the Diquis people in Costa Rica, which are perfectly shaped and arranged, definitely a testament to human creativity. So while the Bosnian sphere is super intriguing, it's probably just an ancient concretion and not a remnant of a lost civilization. Bummer. Finally, some things are so well hidden that you have to go deep down into the seafloor to get a glimpse of them. Once a hedonistic hotspot for the Roman elite, Baia was like the Las Vegas of its time, but now its ruins are submerged underwater. This resort city thrived on volcanic hot springs and attracted the likes of Nero and Caesar, who even built vacation villas there. However, in the 8th century, Baia lost a battle and was abandoned by 1500. As the water levels rose, much of the city was lost beneath the bay. Today, you can explore Baia's ancient ruins in one of the few underwater archaeological parks in the world. Hold your breath.
On September 16th of 2023, without warning, the Earth began to hum. A low, strange vibration reverberated through the crust. This set off seismic alarms all across the globe. For 9 days straight, the planet was pulsing with this horrifying rhythm, and scientists had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, the total disaster was happening in Greenland. It wasn't an earthquake. They knew that much. They could tell it by the rhythm. Since we all live on giant tectonic plates, they constantly move and slide on magma like icebergs on water. Sometimes, as they move, they can rub against each other or collide or break. In any case, all this causes an incredible release of energy that sends shockwaves through the ground. That's when we feel the ground literally shaking, and it's what we call an earthquake. These vibrations we feel are called seismic waves. Seismometers pick them up as pings or rumbles. In a typical earthquake, they create a bunch of different frequencies. It's a crazy chaotic mix of low and high frequencies, like smashing every piano key. What was weird about the Greenland event is that the signals weren't like that at all. It was a steady, single-frequency vibration, as if some ancient machine was stirring beneath the Earth. It's like one piano key being struck over and over, creating a doom-like, repetitive sound. Turns out, what they were hearing wasn't the noise of tectonic plates going wild. It was a phenomenon seismologists had never seen before. The days passed, and the mysterious noise just kept going. The vibrations repeated every 90 seconds, echoing around the world. The hunt for answers was growing more desperate. Seismologists had no idea what they were dealing with. They had to gather a huge international team of 68 people from 15 countries. All these scientists were gathering seismic data, satellite images, and doing some advanced math for several days, until they finally realized who the culprit was. Water. It all happened in a remote, desolate region of East Greenland. This place is full of fjords, narrow inlets of the sea between high cliffs, kinda like deep water-filled valleys surrounded by towering rocky sides. In this area, surrounded by jagged peaks and icy waters, the air was still. The landscape seemingly frozen in time. Nothing here changed much for years, until one day. A colossal landslide has unfolded in the Dixon Fjord. One of those steep mountainsides towering over the fjord at almost 4,000 feet high collapsed in a massive landslide. Picture a huge chunk of this mountain crumbling and crashing down into the fjord below. This sent a deluge of rock and ice crashing into the water. The impact was just apocalyptic, 882 million cubic feet of debris. That's enough ice and rock to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or 10 Great Pyramids of Giza. And all this nightmare hurled into the water with such force that it kick-started a tsunami about 360 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, into the air. What's crazy is that this incredibly powerful wave was trapped in the fjord by narrow cliffs, unable to escape. It's like water sloshing in a closed bathtub. For 9 days, the mega tsunami continued to churn through it. That's why we heard this endless hum. It was a rhythmic back and forth of the water slamming against the walls. The shock waves were rippling deep into Earth's crust, vibrations so strong that they were picked up by seismometers around the globe. This was a phenomenon so rare, so unprecedented, that it left scientists stunned. It turned out to be a perfect storm of elements. A glacier, weakened by years of warming, could no longer bear the weight of the mountain above. This collapse was inevitable, and the chaos literally shook the Earth to its core. And people often hang out in this area with cruise ships passing by. We're lucky that no lives were lost in the disaster. It was a close call though. A tourist ship stranded in the area just 2 days before narrowly escaped the tsunami's reach by pure luck. But it doesn't mean there were no losses. The waves destroyed a nearby Inuit site, which was there untouched for over 200 years. They also swept away the huts at a research station that were about 43 miles away. The vibrations traveled from Greenland to the South Pole in less than an hour. That just shows how dangerous events like this can be. And this isn't the only place where such catastrophes are happening. In the beautiful California community of Rancho Palos Verdes, the ground is shifting so quickly that it's tearing homes apart. The land there has always been kinda unstable. It has some unique geology. It's built on soft, clay-rich soil and sits on a geological fault line, which makes it prone to landslides. This means that this land is prone to slow natural shifting over many years, even when no crazy weather is happening. It's been like this for decades, but usually it's slow and pretty manageable, like about a foot a year. Imagine a tree that you played with as a kid moving 20 feet to the left as you grow up. For decades, residents adapted. They built their homes on adjustable beams. This helped the houses to move with the land. And that strategy worked well, until now. Recently, things have been getting much worse in the community. Now, the land is moving by a foot in a single week. That would be like if the same tree moved almost 960 feet since you were a child. The past 2 years have also caused some heavy rains, and the weather has been getting worse. This increased water content in the soil. The land became heavier and more prone to rapid movement. Now, this once idyllic seaside escape turned into a disaster zone. Cracks have appeared in closets, gardens, and roads, growing larger with each passing day. Streets that were once smooth are now buckled and twisted, with roads turning into a crazy theme park. Houses that once stood firm are being ripped from their foundations, some of them split in half. One of the houses had its front door 8 feet off the ground. Entire neighborhoods have been plunged into chaos. Utility companies had to switch off gas and electricity indefinitely to prevent potential disasters. The hardest hit is the coastal neighborhood of Portuguese Bend, where residents are living on the edge, literally. It always had amazing ocean views and cool sea breezes, with horses and peacocks still wandering the tree-lined streets. But now, it's like an earthquake hit. Only this time, the Earth isn't stopping. For many, this place feels like paradise, if only the land would stop shifting beneath their feet. So the locals don't give up. Some of them had to leave, but many are determined to stay and fight, despite the destruction. But they still have to pour in hundreds of thousands of dollars to save their properties. People have installed generators to keep the lights on and set up sewer systems and pumps to drain the groundwater causing the landslides. Some say that the only way for these neighborhoods to survive might be to go completely off-grid, installing power walls to store energy and stuff like that. People are trying their best to run the sewer system off generators. They hope that they could get rid of this water in the soil that's causing these hellish landslides in the first place. They're determined to fight, but they will need help and support from the government to fight this disaster. Landslides are actually more common across the US than many might think. And new maps and data show that tons of people in the country might be in danger. Scientists managed to create the first very detailed, very cool map that shows where these landslides might happen, county by county. It's based on a lot of data and the history of 1 million previous landslides. They say that nearly 40% of the United States is at risk of experiencing landslide activity, which could lead to some insane catastrophes in certain areas. Luckily, now both residents and engineers can keep this in mind. But all this shows how vulnerable we are to natural disasters, and how we should always stay alerted. There's nothing around, just the eternal, endless whiteness of Greenland's snow and cold winds blowing into your face. Nothing hints at the impending catastrophe. You take another step and freeze in horror. An abyss is spreading at your feet, bottomless and dark. If you had made a bigger step, it would have swallowed you. That infamous Greenland's hole. It happened in the middle of the 2010s. A group of geologists were scanning the surface of Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier using radar when they spotted something very, very strange. It was a giant pit, more than 980 feet deep and almost 20 miles wide. That's big enough to fit inside Washington, D.C. or Paris. After staring at their radars for quite a while and scratching their heads, researchers decided to find out what could have made such a huge hole. Could it have been good old erosion, a raging volcano, an asteroid impact, a giant sandworm? Ugh, I might have gone a bit overboard with this worm idea, but you never know with these ancient glaciers. Anyway, in our case, one mystery seemed to lead to another, which had been puzzling scientists for decades. And to solve both of them, scientists needed something super common, but at the same time very important: quartz, one of the most abundant materials in Earth's crust. But before we dig deeper into this topic, let's make a small detour and talk about a pretty bizarre phenomenon called the Younger Dryas event. To see what it was like, we need to go deep into the past, as far back as 12,900 to 11,600 years ago. During that period, the planet became much colder, especially in Europe and North America. Now, let's talk a bit more about that weird climate change in the Northern Hemisphere. There are a few theories. One that involves a change in currents in the Atlantic Ocean. Another speaks about something large kicking tons of dust into the air and effectively blocking sunlight. The two most popular and likely hypotheses mention a volcanic eruption and an asteroid impact. Indeed, there was a volcanic eruption on the territory of modern-day Germany at around the right time. But there's also a probability that a space object struck the planet during this period too. And now let's get back to the hole scientists found in Greenland. When NASA's Ice Bridge program and Germany's Alfred Wegener Institute discovered it, it seemed they had finally found the reason for the Younger Dryas event. But was it really an asteroid that created that impressive pit and caused temperatures to drop all over the Northern Hemisphere? To test this theory, the researchers needed quartz. The thing is, in its pure form, quartz has a very simple structure. It's made from interlocking silicon-oxygen tetrahedra. Efficient and so pretty. Just look at these six-sided prismatic crystals. Since its structure is so simple and the components are so common, you can find quartz almost in any rock on the planet. At one point, magic happens. Larger rocks erode away, pushing out tiny bits of quartz sand. The scientists exploring the mysterious pit gathered the quartz sand that had been washed out from underneath a glacier. It was like looking at the rocks at the very bottom of the hole without having to actually get all the way down there. Very handy. So while examining the material, they discovered quartz grains with the telltale signs of terrible catastrophe. They had PDFs all over them. No, I'm not talking about the document format. PDFs stand for planar deformation features, and they look like lines etched into the crystal surface. These lines are a sign that you're holding shocked quartz. It forms under immense pressure, when the internal crystals are pushed out of alignment. But the most exciting thing here is that shocked quartz only appears under the influence of powerful forces, like massive impacts or terrifying explosions. In other words, finding this poor shocked quartz under the Hiawatha Glacier could be much needed proof that the hole was an enormous impact crater that formed when something equally enormous crash-landed there. Based on the size of the crater, this space object probably was a bit more than a mile across, which is twice the height of the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai. A meteorite that big would have looked 3 times as bright as the sun when traveling across the sky, and it would have hit Earth with an immense force. The impact would have been so great it'd have vaporized rock and thrown debris for hundreds of miles away. The sky would have filled with dust. It would have dimmed the sun and led to a temperature drop all over the planet. And guess what? The last part about decreasing temperatures got the researchers super excited, because it opened up a possibility that the impact could have been connected to the Younger Dryas event. To prove this idea, scientists decided to use quartz again. They examined it more closely, trying to date the impact. Well, they were in for an even greater shock. The Hiawatha crater turned out to be not 12,000, but 58 million years old. On the other hand, the researchers were disappointed that they hadn't been able to confirm their theory. The crater couldn't explain the Younger Dryas cold snap, but on the other hand, it was still an amazing discovery. Now, get ready for one final twist to this story, and it revolves around quartz again. Other scientists have recently discovered more deposits of shocked quartz all over what is now the eastern USA. It was hiding in sediment layers dating to just before the Younger Dryas. Interestingly, there aren't any craters around those sites whatsoever. But quartz can't lie. It provides evidence of a powerful explosion. It makes scientists think that their impact hypothesis might still be true, but instead of a collision, it could be an airburst. A massive comet could have broken up while entering Earth's atmosphere around 12,000 years ago, and the fragments could have exploded before reaching the ground. It would have caused catastrophic mass burning throughout the North American continent and messed with the climate so much that the Younger Dryas would have been triggered. Well, I guess we need to wait a bit longer for scientists to find some further proof of this hypothesis. But it doesn't mean we don't have any more curious phenomena to explore in Greenland. Take these fascinating holes. They sure are kinda smaller than the monster we were talking about. They're called moulins, and they carry surface meltwater all the way down to the base of the Greenland ice sheet. And they have prepared some surprises for us too. Apparently, they're way larger than we previously thought. That's what a recent study based on observation and first-hand exploration claims. Even more interesting, this high volume might influence the stability of the ginormous ice sheet in question, as well as the speed at which it's sliding towards the sea. Researchers think that increased water depth and pressure inside moulins might lubricate the base of the ice sheet, making it move faster. You know, the way an ice cube slides more easily on a thin film of melted water. Until recently, we knew too little about the real size of moulins and how much water they can hold. But now, we know that moulins can be giant. The team made 2 trips to the Greenland ice sheet in 2018 and 2019. And during each of them, they used ropes and climbing equipment to drop around 330 feet into 2 separate moulins, almost touching the water's surface. Those who did it described the experience as intimidating. Picture this. Your back is over the edge. All you see is bluish ice going down and blurring into blackness. And the only thing you hear is occasional sounds of crashing ice. It must be extremely unnerving.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.